As morning light streams softly across the grand ducal estate, young Master Nick steps into the sunlit hallways in exceptionally high spirits. Greeting the bowing maids with an eager, cheerful smile, he immediately inquires if anyone knows where his mother is, assuming she might have stepped outside for a serene morning walk. Watching him hum happily as he walks away, the maids exchange thoughtful glances. Yesterday marked Nick's formal coming of age, yet the very first person he wished to see was his stepmother. For 7 years long, she endured silent resentment and cold judgment from everyone around her, all to keep a sacred promise to her late friend. Unable to locate her downstairs, Nick bounds up the grand mahogany staircase and throws open the heavy doors to his father's private office. He eagerly asks if his father knows where his mother has gone, but the Duke remains motionless behind his desk, staring grimly down at a solitary sheet of paper. Without offering a single word of explanation, his father reaches across the desk and hands the paper directly to him. Nick takes the document with a puzzled look, completely unprepared for the heartbreaking revelation written upon the page. The neatly written words strike him like a physical blow. Their agreed 7 years have officially expired, and in accordance with the contract, she has departed the ducal house to finally live her own life. A wave of deep panic washes over Nick as he turns to his father, desperately demanding to know what this means. The Duke's jaw tightens as an oppressive silence settles over the room. He sternly instructs Nick to contact his older brother without a moment's delay, leaving the contract resting quietly on the desk, a silent testament to the harsh reality that their long-suffering stepmother has vanished from their lives forever. 7 years in the past, a solemn hush hangs over the funeral proceedings. Guests exchange hushed, sorrowful whispers about the sudden carriage accident that claimed the life of the Duchess, leaving her impressionable young children behind. Within the dim, lily-filled chapel, mourners step forward one by one to lay white flowers upon the memorial table. The air is heavy with shared grief for a life cut far too short. As nobility offer formal condolences to the grieving Duke, his 2 young sons cling tightly to his side. Overcome by heartbreak, the young boys break into uncontrollable tears, sobbing openly in the middle of the hall. Standing quietly apart from the crowd, a young woman clad in a black veil moves toward the coffin. With delicate trembling fingers, she gently sets down a tribute of white chrysanthemums. A desperate plea rises to let family see her face one last time. Looking into her sorrowful eyes, the Duke quietly assents, believing his late wife would truly wish to share her final farewell. At his command, the guards step forward and carefully heave open the heavy casket lid. Nestled within floral arrangements, the late Duchess lies motionless, her delicate features covered by a soft veil of white lace. Gazing down at her friend's serene, frozen face, the young woman's chest tightens with unspoken sorrow. As she stands motionless beside the open coffin, memories of how their deep connection first began rush back to her. Years ago at the academy, she had walked through the bustling corridors alone, completely isolated from her peers. Clutching her books tightly to her chest, she felt like an invisible outsider in a world full of laughter. That cold solitude ended when a friendly hand unexpectedly tapped her shoulder. Turning around, she was met by a bright, radiant smile as young Diana introduced herself, extending a gentle warmth that would change her life forever. Their academy years unfolded like a beautiful dream, filled with golden sunshine and endless comfort. Running together hand in hand through blooming white flower fields, Diana's bright, carefree laughter transformed her once isolated world, forging a deep sisterly bond that felt completely unbreakable. Whenever she rested amidst the quiet blossoms and gently opened her eyes, Diana was always right there, leaning down with that warm, unforgettable smile. In those tranquil, sun-dappled moments under the open sky, she found a profound sense of belonging she had never known before. As the years passed, that cherished connection only grew stronger. She stayed devotedly by Diana's side throughout her pregnancy, tenderly touching her friend's belly, and later gathered together to celebrate the cheerful birthday milestones of Diana's young children with absolute devotion. Diana's life was overflowing with radiant happiness as she joyfully embraced her little son, her bright giggles echoing warmly through the estate halls. Seeing her dearest friend thrive as a loving mother brought true, unselfish joy to her heart. Back in the dim, quiet chapel, she reaches into the casket with trembling, lace-gloved fingers to gently clasp Diana's motionless hands. Leaning down close to her friend's lace-veiled face, she whispers a soft, tearful rest in peace, expressing her deepest gratitude for everything. As night settles heavily over the quiet ducal mansion, the grieving duke approaches her with a low, hesitant plea. Overwhelmed by unbearable heartbreak, he asks if she will help him sort through his late wife's personal belongings, admitting he simply cannot face the painful task by himself. Stepping into the dimly lit room filled with stacked boxes, wrapped gifts, and delicate floral arrangements, she gazes across the floor in quiet reflection. Realizing just how many of her own possessions are intertwined with Diana's, she prepares herself to handle each precious memory with care. Standing surrounded by Diana's personal treasures, Cassia gazes thoughtfully across the quiet, sunlit study. A heavy question weighs upon her heart, leaving her to wonder why her dearest friend went through all the trouble of preparing a room specifically for her while leaving behind such haunting, mysterious parting words. Just 3 days before the tragic accident, Diana had tightly squeezed Cassia's hand, softly asking if she would look after her family if ever suddenly passed away. Though thoroughly shaken by such an unsettling thought, Cassia looked into her friend's earnest face and softly agreed, unable to ever say no to her. Realizing Diana had spoken 3 days prior, almost as if she knew her own death was coming, Cassia pauses beside the dark bookshelves. Her lace-gloved fingers brush against an unfamiliar leather journal hidden among the heavy books, prompting her to pull it down and carefully flip through its pages with growing unease. The written words strike her like a sudden blow, causing her eyes to widen in complete horror. As cold sweat breaks out across her pale face, Cassia staggers back in sheer disbelief. Her hands tremble violently, and the diary nearly slips from her grip as the dark truth unfolds before her. Clutching the secret diary tightly to her chest, Cassia desperately runs through the grand mansion hallways. Diana's desperate entries describe a horrifying sequence of bizarre accidents and deliberate near misses, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was being targeted for murder long before her fatal carriage crash. Deeply terrified that her sudden demise would leave her young sons exposed to court politics and an imperial arranged remarriage, Diana had poured her desperate fears onto the paper. Fearing her children would be cast aside, she orchestrated a sacred promise to secure their future before her time ran out. Cassia presents the worn journal to the Duke. Gazing down at the pages, his heart stops as he instantly recognizes his late wife's distinct handwriting. Shaken to his core, he closes the cover and looks up in complete bewilderment, demanding to know what the meaning of this unsettling discovery could possibly be. Cassia explains quietly that it is Diana's private diary, which she stumbled upon while carefully clearing out her personal belongings. She admits that Diana deliberately left it hidden in her quarters, knowing she would find it, leading the Duke to stare in wide-eyed shock as the frightening implication begins to sink in. With unyielding resolve in her eyes, Cassia confirms the horrifying truth hidden within the written pages. Diana's untimely demise was never a mere tragic carriage accident. She had been deliberately targeted and brutally murdered, leaving them both facing a dark reality neither of them ever expected. She quietly confirms the dark reality hanging over them, revealing that Diana's death was no tragic accident. She was murdered, bringing to light a horrifying truth that had been kept hidden from everyone for years. Overwhelmed by shock and sudden rage, the Duke slams his hands on the desk and steps forward. Grabbing her by the arm, he fiercely demands to know why Diana kept such a vital secret from him if the diary is true. Looking into his eyes, she gently explains that Diana only wanted to shield the man she loved from danger, knowing he would become a target. Shaken by her words, the Duke slowly lets go of her arm and steps back, apologizing for losing his composure. Moving past his outburst, she asks about the next concerning entry in Diana's diary, pressing him on whether a remarriage into the royal family is truly a possibility. His hand clenches into a tight fist before he reluctantly admits he cannot rule it out. He reveals that the emperor had long sought to solidify power by binding their duchy to the crown through marriage. Even after his happy engagement to Diana was announced, the royal court persistently pushed for a strategic political union. Reflecting on those turbulent years, she begins connecting the hidden pieces of the past. Rejecting the royal family's marriage offer came at a devastating cost, leaving Diana isolated and targeted by malicious whispers among the nobility. Recalling the early days of their relationship, she remembers how out of place Diana felt before the imperial court eventually blessed their union. Watching his expression harden, the Duke firmly insists that even if the royal court proposes another strategic marriage, he will refuse to accept it. She gently warns him that repeatedly turning down direct imperial commands could provoke the royal family's dangerous wrath. Asking him to look beyond surface appearances, she urges him to consider what sinister motives might be hiding beneath their persistent, forceful demands. With a fierce succession battle currently destabilizing the throne, the royal family is more desperate than ever to expand their influence. She presses the Duke with a chilling question, asking whether Diana's tragic death was intentionally engineered to open up an opportunity for the crown to seize control. Tightening his hand into a tight fist, the Duke passionately vows that he will never open his heart to anyone other than Diana. But as his painful vow echoes between them, a sudden realization strikes her, bringing a poignant memory rushing back to the surface. She vividly recalls Diana wearing a bittersweet smile, asking what felt like a simple hypothetical at the time, whether she would step in to care for her family if she were to die suddenly. Overwhelmed by the true meaning behind her late friend's final request, she sways with dizziness. Seeing her stumble, the Duke rushes forward to steady her, holding her arm gently and insisting she rest while they defer the rest of their conversation. Looking directly into his eyes, she shakes off her sudden weakness and firmly insists on staying to help him navigate this dangerous crisis. Standing tall with complete determination, she makes an unexpected proposal, offering to step into the role of Duchess until the children fully come of age. Her bold declaration leaves the Duke frozen in complete shock as he struggles to process her life-changing offer. Stunned by her unexpected offer, the Duke struggles to process her words. She calmly explains that a strategic marriage between them would give him the perfect justification to reject the Emperor's marriage demands, noting that as someone with no family left to protect, she has nothing to lose. Clutching her chest, she reminds him that she severed all ties with her noble relatives long ago. With a steady gaze, she looks into his eyes and firmly insists there is no one more suited to step into this dangerous role than her. The Duke immediately rejects her proposal, refusing to even consider it. Undeterred, she offers to sign a formal contract promising to leave the estate the moment the children reach adulthood, but he firmly insists that the contract is not the real issue. Frustrated by his blunt refusal, she passionately demands a reason she can accept. His composure shatters as he shouts back, revealing that his true fear is putting her life in direct danger alongside his own. Her eyes widen in shock as his hidden concern comes to light. He admits that with Diana's death still unexplained, anyone stepping into the role of Duchess could become the next victim, leaving him unable to guarantee her safety. As he buries his face in his hands, heavy with guilt, she takes a gentle step forward and leans against his arm. Looking up at him without hesitation, she softly assures him that he can simply protect her this time. Her voice trembles slightly, but her eyes remain fiercely determined. She confesses that she must uncover the truth behind Diana's tragic murder and discover who was truly responsible for taking her best friend's life. She urges him to turn this dangerous plot to their advantage. If the killer's ultimate goal is to seize control of the duchy, entering a contract marriage will lure the culprit into the open so they can finally bring them to justice. Clasping her hands tightly over her chest, she reminds him that fulfilling this contract is the final request Diana left behind for her to honor. Looking into her eyes with grave concern, the Duke asks if she is truly certain she will not regret taking on such a dangerous commitment. Without a single moment of hesitation, she gives him a firm, decisive nod. Meeting her unwavering gaze, the Duke reaches across the desk and solemnly accepts her proposal. He insists that they must begin wedding preparations immediately for the following week, planning a grand and perfect ceremony so that the surrounding nobles will not harbor any lingering suspicions about their sudden, unexpected union. Moving forward far faster than she anticipated, she soon walks down the white aisle in an elegant wedding gown beside the Duke. Sharp criticism and malicious whispers immediately echo from the judging nobles, while Diana's two young sons look on with solemn, guarded expressions as public outrage focuses entirely on their new stepmother. Sensing the heavy hostility filling the room, the Duke softly advises her to ignore the cruel gossip of outsiders. Turning to him with a serene smile, she reassures him that she was fully prepared for this backlash, knowing that if simple rumors could break her spirit, she never would have agreed to become the Duchess in the first place. Looking over at the two young boys sitting quietly during the service, she reminds herself that 7 long years remain until they finally come of age. Surrounded by unseen malice lurking in the shadows, she steel hardens her resolve, determined to protect the seat of the Duchess, no matter what dark forces attempt to tear her down. Standing before the priest as their strategic marriage is officially solemnized, she offers a silent pledge to her late best friend. Vowing directly to Diana that she will uncover the dark truth behind her tragic murder, she willingly steps onto a perilous path, ready to walk into the fires of hell on her own 2 feet. Looking into his eyes during the solemn ceremony, she accepts this heavy responsibility not only for her beloved friend Diana, but also to secure her own path forward. Both of them meet each other's gazes with quiet resolve, fully aware of the dangerous political battle ahead. As the wedding ring is gently slipped onto her finger to seal their strategic union, a shadow of foreboding lingers in the quiet air. She has no idea that the intense trial beginning today is merely the prologue to a far greater storm. The very first order of business upon assuming her position as the new Duchess is the swift and uncompromising dismissal of the headmaid. As the woman's packed luggage rests on the floor, the sudden decision leaves the butler completely unsettled, nervously asking why such a drastic step is being taken so early in the day. Drawn by the unusual morning commotion, the Duke steps into the hall with an imposing, quiet authority. His sharp gaze quickly takes in the room as the surrounding household staff drop into low, synchronized bows, waiting anxiously to see how he will react. Without a hint of hesitation, the Duchess formally declares her decision to dismiss the headmaid. As the sobbing servant throws herself onto the floor protesting her innocence, the Duke demands to know what is happening, only for his wife to plainly state that disrespect against the Duchess cannot be tolerated. Panic setting in, the maid frantically begs for her job, claiming she would never dream of slighting her mistress, and insisting there has been a terrible mistake. However, the Duchess meets her loud excuses with a dark, composed gaze, entirely unmoved by her frantic attempts to defend herself. Behind that polite facade lay years of calculated, silent abuse aimed directly at her. Every morning, the maid had spitefully delivered wash water so bitingly cold that a delicate layer of ice had formed over the top, taking quiet satisfaction in making her daily life miserable. The petty cruelty extended into every meal, as the maid intentionally served her food on scratched, chipped plates to subtly undermine her dignity. Worst of all, whenever no one was looking, the woman went so far as to spit directly into her after-dinner coffee before serving it. Looming over the kneeling servant, the Duchess chillingly reveals that she witnessed every single act of malice with her own eyes, completely dismantling any remaining lies. Shaken to her core and terrified of the consequences, the maid can only tremble violently, pleading that she is the longest-serving worker in the duchy. Unmoved by her frantic pleas, the Duke cuts off her desperate begging with cold finality, commanding the headmaid to leave the estate immediately. His gloved hand rests heavily upon the hilt of his sword, radiating a dark and dangerous aura that leaves no doubt about his absolute lack of mercy. Slamming his heavy scabbard down onto the floor right beside her, kneeling figure, he chillingly warns her to get out before he loses the last of his patience. Gasping in utter terror, the disgraced maid frantically grabs her packed suitcase and flees through the grand mansion doors. Standing side by side with the Duchess before the entire assembled household staff, the Duke commands everyone to listen closely. Looking over the trembling servants, he sternly warns that if anyone else ever dares to disrespect his wife in such a manner, they will face severe punishment. Once every 3 months, away from prying eyes, the Duke and Duchess would secretly gather within his private office. Surrounded by thick stacks of documents and open ledgers, their quiet meetings served a single vital purpose: meticulously investigating Diana's mysterious movements leading up to her tragic accident. Pulling out his intricate golden pocket watch, the Duke stares at in surprise, realizing just how late it has become. Turning toward the sofa after their long hours of review, he softly speaks to Lady Cassia, suggesting that she should return to her bedchambers for the night. However, Cassia has already succumbed to sheer exhaustion, resting peacefully on the plush armchair. Moving with quiet tenderness, the Duke steps closer and carefully drapes a warm blanket over her bare shoulders, gazing down at her as he softly remarks on how tired she must be. Memories of her late friend Diana linger in quiet sentiment while Cassia slumbers undisturbed under his watchful gaze. The Duke stands quietly by her side in the dimly lit office, maintaining his silent vigil until her long dark eyelashes flutter and her eyes slowly blink open. Awakening on the couch, Cassia quickly apologizes for drifting off during their late-night review. But the Duke warmly reassures her that it is no trouble at all. Sitting forward at his desk, he carefully shifts the topic, admitting there is an important proposal he has been waiting for the right moment to make. He offers a startling addition to their contract. If Cassia should fall in love with someone else during their agreement, he will dissolve their marriage immediately without imposing any penalties. Caught entirely off guard by the unexpected gesture, Cassia gazes him in splendor and asks why he would ever suggest such a clause. The Duke solemnly explains that she agreed to a loveless marriage purely for the sake of his grieving family, and without offering her this freedom, he would not be able to look her in the eye. Touched by his earnest consideration, Cassia offers a smile and softly declines, assuring him that she is truly fine. She gently reminds herself of the promise she swore when becoming Duchess, that for the next 7 years, she will be a devoted true mother to Diana's children. Observing her unwavering resolve, a gentle, rare smile breaks across the Duke's usually guarded expression, acknowledging the quiet strength behind her words. Lightening the atmosphere, Cassia playfully promises that if she ever finds love 7 years down the road, he will be the first person she introduces them to. The Duke readily gives his word, and as they share a warm, joyful laugh across the desk, a comfortable warmth settles between them. Just beyond the office entrance, young Ken slowly pushes the grand doors open, peeking into the dimly lit room with wide, trembling eyes. Seeing his father sharing such an affectionate, cheerful moment with a woman he barely knows leaves the young boy pale with profound shock and disbelief. Overcome with anger and bitter grief so soon after his mother's tragic passing, Ken violently bursts into the office. Cassia stands up in shock, calling out his name, but the distraught child ignores her, tears streaming down his face as he points an accusing finger and angrily demands why this strange woman is here. Outraged by his father's sudden calmness, young Ken fiercely demands to know how he can laugh when his mother has just passed away. Tears streaming down his face, the boy reveals the cruel gossip spreading throughout the estate, that his mother died miserable, heartlessly betrayed by her husband and her closest friend. Cassia stands paralyzed in shock as Ken breaks down, asking why his late mother must be spoken of so terribly. The grief-stricken boy tearfully declares that he does not care who his father sees, but cannot bear to watch his mother's memory dragged through the mud. Desperate for relief, Ken demands that his father throw this woman out of their home immediately if he cares about them at all. But the Duke steps in firmly, taking full responsibility by admitting he was the one who invited her, commanding Ken to direct all of his anger at him instead. Overcome with bitter fury, Ken lets out a dark, mocking laugh and dismisses his father's explanation as a lie. Glaring at them with icy contempt, the young boy snarls that if she was truly brought for their sake, there is even less reason why she cannot be cast out right now. Turning away toward the exit, Ken hesitates at the open threshold. Turning back to glance over his shoulder at the silent couple, he prepares to deliver one final painful blow before leaving the room. With a cold glare, Ken viciously reminds them that at his mother's funeral, everyone wept except for 2 people. Looking between his father and Cassia, he venomously declares that they were the only ones who did not shed a single tear. The devastating charge hits Cassia with crushing force. As Ken flees into the dark hallway and the Duke fruitlessly calls after him, Cassia collapses helplessly onto the floor, her trembling hands clutching her dress in agonizing, sorrowful silence. As a warm cup of tea is softly set down on the table, the Duke quietly breaks the stillness lingering between them. Cassia offers her thanks with a gentle smile, but his expression turns serious as he addresses her directly. Hesitating for a brief moment, he brings up their contract marriage, asking whether the time has finally come to share the truth with the children. Cassia gazes downward in troubled silence, haunted by sorrowful memories of the young boy weeping alone in the dark. Revealing their hidden connection to the royal family and the secrets behind Diana's death right now feels far too perilous. She knows the children still suffer deeply from their grief, and exposing everything right now could completely break them. Overwhelmed by lingering remorse, she lowers her face and blames herself for stubbornly insisting that the arrangement remain secret. But the Duke quickly steps forward to ease her heavy heart, reminding her that he willingly agreed to the decision as well. He gently offers reassurance, comforting her with the soft hope that Ken will calm down in time and remember how attached he once was to her. Time glides past much faster than anticipated, and right around the time high society's scandals finally begin to fade away, Cassia steps seamlessly into the role of the perfect duchess. Yet despite the grand mansion and exquisite meals set before them, a heavy distance remains. Sitting at opposite ends of the vast dining table, the family shares their meals in formal, cold quiet. As Cassia sits quietly at the long dining table, reserved glances pass between her and the Duke amidst the heavy atmosphere. Noticing the empty chair, the Duke inquires whether Ken is still absent. The butler bows respectfully in response, explaining that a maid has just gone upstairs to rouse the young master from his room for breakfast. Before anyone can settle into the quiet meal, panicked footsteps echo sharply down the hallway. The dining room door bursts open as a visibly shaken maid rushes inside, clutching her chest as she frantically calls out to her lord and madam, shattering the quiet atmosphere of the mansion with unexpected news. The maid's frantic cry cuts through the heavy quiet of the dining hall, gasping out that young Master Ken has vanished. The shocking revelation leaves both Cassia and the Duke staring in stunned disbelief, their solemn mourning instantly shattered as deep anxiety washes over them both. Drenching themselves in the torrential downpour, the family rushes outdoors into the relentless storm. Alongside a deeply distressed young Nick, Cassia and the Duke trek through the wet, darkened grounds, frantically calling out Ken's name in desperate hope of finding him. After hours of searching through the cold rain, they finally spot the missing boy. Soaked to the bone, Ken sits helplessly collapsed against Diana's tombstone, weeping in heartbreaking sorrow until his father rushes forward and holds him tightly in a protective embrace. Just days after being brought back home, Ken abruptly announces his enlistment in the Royal Knights and departs. He leaves the estate immediately without ever turning back, never returning to the family home throughout all the remaining years leading up to the day Cassia finally fulfills her contract and departs. 7 long years glide past as time steadily marches forward across the Duke's vast estate. The grand mansion stands bathed in warm sunlight, setting the stage for a new era as the entire household eagerly busies itself preparing for a major family celebration. Inside the estate, maids clean and dust the grand halls with cheerful energy, chatting about how long it has been since they last prepared for a grand party. They fondly recall how small young Master Nick used to be, marveling that he is already coming of age. Dressed in a majestic blue gown, Cassia glides gracefully into the hall, her regal stance instantly commanding the attention of the staff. Moving with refined elegance, she carries out her noble duties as Duchess with flawless composure, overseeing every detail of the estate with unwavering care. Cassia gently inquires whether the banquet preparations are proceeding smoothly according to her exact instructions. The maid bows respectfully and confirms that everything is well underway, presenting a lavish menu complete with caviar canapés, gourmet meat and seafood selections, and the generous dessert spread she specifically requested. After confirming that an extra supply of Nick's favorite pudding has been prepared for the grand menu, Cassia offers warm praise to the servants before walking ahead. As she glides past, the maids pause their dusting to whisper softly among themselves. They wonder if a touch of quiet loneliness hides behind her flawless composure now that the young master has officially come of age. Stepping outside into the quiet courtyard, Cassia pauses on the stone steps and raises a gloved hand to shade her eyes against the gleaming afternoon sun. A deep, bittersweet emotion settles in her heart as she reflects on the moment she has anticipated for 7 long years. With Nick reaching adulthood today, her solemn contract is finally complete, and she prepares to leave the estate behind forever. Inside the glittering ballroom, elegant music and lively laughter fill the hall as high society gathers to celebrate the young heir. Dressed in magnificent ceremonial attire, Nick radiates charm and confidence while mingling with the admiring crowd. Guests exchange excited whispers over how handsome he has grown, wondering what extraordinary birthday gift the Duke has prepared, and whether someone special in the room has caught the young master's eye. The grand announcer steps up to his podium, calling for everyone's attention as he officially begins the birthday cake lighting ceremony. Stepping forward with a slender lighting wand, Nick carefully lights the candle atop a spectacular multi-tiered strawberry cake. As warm candlelight glows across the sparkling dessert, a bright, handsome smile spreads across his face, earning admiring gazes from everyone watching. With the ceremony underway, Nick turns away from the cake and eagerly searches through the sea of gathered guests. Standing gracefully near the back of the room in her elegant blue gown, Cassia watches him from a quiet distance. Her calm, composed demeanor hides the quiet pride she feels as she gazes upon the young man she cared for over the past 7 years. The instant his eyes lock onto hers across the crowded ballroom, Nick's expression softens, beaming into a brilliant, heartfelt smile meant entirely for her. Cassia's breath catches as her eyes widen in silent surprise at his joyous reaction, completely unprepared for the tender bond that still remains despite the years and secrets between them. Watching Nick laugh amidst a crowd of adoring friends, Cassia marvels at his radiant expression, briefly mistaking his rare, heartwarming smile for one intended for her. But as the Duke glides beside her with champagne in hand, he softly clarifies that he was admiring her own gentle face, leaving her flustered and caught completely off guard. Blushing slightly, Cassia lowers her eyes and deflects his praise, sharing how deeply grateful she feels simply seeing Nick mature into such a fine young man. Yet the Duke gazes down at her with genuine warmth, insisting that the boy's growth was made possible through her endless devotion and thanking her for everything she carried over the years. Fondly remembering how she painstakingly baked the children's birthday cakes by hand. Throughout all those past years, the Duke praises today's magnificent creation. As Cassia softly agrees that today marks a truly special milestone, he leans in and asks whether she has ever considered pursuing her own happiness by opening a bakery someday. As thunderous applause echoes across the glittering ballroom, Cassia stands shoulder to shoulder with Axion, while the surrounding nobility toasted the new heir. Standing gracefully in her beautiful gown, she holds her glass in quiet reflection, offering the Duke her silent, heartfelt thanks for acknowledging her long years of hidden sacrifice. Late that night, in the tranquil solitude of her private room, Cassia dips her feathered quill to write her final message. Strengthened by the Duke's comforting words, she feels a profound sense of relief wash over her, ready to step out of the mansion at long last without carrying a single regret in her heart. Stepping away from her long-standing role as both stepmother and duchess, Cassia carefully puts quill to paper to write a quiet farewell letter. 7 years have passed since her contractual marriage began, and with Nick finally coming of age, her solemn promise to her late friend is at last complete. Leaving her written letter alongside her discarded wedding ring upon the study desk, she offers a final blessing to the Phaedrian family before stepping away to begin her new life. Wrapped in a dark hooded cloak, Cassia slips into the stillness of the night carrying only a single suitcase. She pauses along the courtyard stone path, burdened by lingering regret over leaving before discovering the full truth behind Diana's tragic death. Looking back over her shoulder one last time, she hesitates for a breathless moment before quietly continuing forward into the shadow. Offering her silent goodbyes to Axion and her beloved stepsons, Ken and Nick, she earnestly prays that they continue to live healthy and peaceful lives. With her long contractual duty to the family fulfilled without regret, Cassia vanishes into the dim night mist to walk her own path as herself. Back inside the estate, Axion walks briskly through the grand marble corridor toward the office, completely unaware of her sudden departure. The instant he arrives at the desk, his eyes widen in profound shock as he discovers the sealed farewell letter and her ring sitting abandoned in the morning light. Determined to find answers, a rider gallops furiously out through the grand iron gates under the bright morning sky. Overwhelmed by confusion and sudden urgency, he races onward across the countryside while wondering what course of action he should take next. Seated quietly inside a moving carriage, the young nobleman sits with a stern and deeply focused expression. Dressed in full military attire, his intense gaze remains fixed ahead as he journeys forward, driven by unresolved feelings and the heavy weight of what lies ahead. Whispers echo through the estate corridors as the servants quietly spread word of the Duchess's sudden disappearance. They marvel at how she devoted herself entirely to preparing Nick's coming-of-age celebration, realizing only now that her devoted efforts were meant as a final farewell. Inside the Duchess's quiet study, shock washes over Nick as the truth is laid bare. Unable to comprehend what he is hearing, he turns to his father in total disbelief, demanding to know the true meaning behind the contract marriage that governed their home for 7 long years. Axion reveals that the emperor had long sought to bind their dukedom, creating severe danger for the family's succession. Fearing for her son's future, the late Duchess Diana asked Cassia to step into the marriage to protect them, leaving Axion equally stunned by Cassia's sudden, quiet departure once her duty ended. As the heavy truth settles across the room, Ken dismisses the conversation with cold indifference. Rising from his seat without a trace of visible emotion, he excuses himself from his father and brother, turning his back on the revelation and walking straight toward the estate stables. Desperate for answers, Nick rushes after his older brother into the stables, asking how he can simply let her walk away like this. Turning around with an icy composure, Ken coldly insists that the woman merely fulfilled her agreed contract and left, claiming everything has returned to its rightful place. Clenching his fist in rising frustration, Nick stares back at his brother with deep hurt and disbelief. He cannot fathom how Ken can remain so detached after learning the sacrifices made behind closed doors, demanding to know how he can speak of her devotion with such callous disregard. Passionately confronting his brother, Nick shouts that she endured 7 long years as their duchess entirely for their sake and protection. Yet Ken remains unbothered, mounting his horse and coldly replying that her choices and her departure have absolutely nothing to do with him. Ken coldly dismisses Cassia's sacrifice, insensitively claiming she acted entirely on her own accord and that no one ever requested her help. Nick listens in stunned disbelief, appalled that his brother can speak so callously about the woman who spent 7 long years protecting their family. Overwhelmed by fury, Nick grabs Ken by the shirt collar, forcefully pinning his brother as tears of anger fill his eyes. He screams that Ken's relentless hostility is the sole reason Cassia left them, insisting she would still be living at the estate if Ken had shown her even a sliver of kindness. This bitter confrontation brings back painful memories of 3 years earlier, when panic erupted across the estate after young Ken suddenly vanished into the night. Servants searched the grand corridors while young Nick called out frantically across the grounds, leaving Axion and Cassia to hunt through the darkness together in desperate concern. As a heavy downpour soaked the estate grounds, Axion earnestly urged Cassia to return indoors to protect her health, but she steadfastly refused to leave his side. Pressing her hand against her chest, Cassia suddenly remembered a deeply personal place where the grieving young boy might have fled. Leading Axion toward the secluded family cemetery, they discovered young collapsed on the stone floor, weeping inconsolably as he clung tightly to his late mother's tombstone. Watching the young boy sob in the pouring rain, both Cassia and Axion stood paralyzed by the weight of his raw, overwhelming sorrow. Walking up through the falling rain, Axion approaches his heartbroken son and gently instructs him that it is time to leave the graveyard and return home. Still collapsed against the cold stone, young Ken cries out in tearful defiance, shouting that he will never return to a house occupied by Cassia. Overcome by the child's stubborn resentment and unable to soothe his lingering pain, Axion rubs his forehead with a tired, heavy sigh. Tears streaming down his rain-soaked face, young Ken fiercely insists that he is not the one being unreasonable. Pointing an accusatory finger through the heavy downpour, the grieving boy angrily confronts both his father and Cassia, demanding to know how they could possibly betray his mother's memory by getting married less than a single year after her tragic passing. Stepping gently through the rain, Cassia softly reveals that the late Duchess Diana herself asked her to step into the household and protect her beloved children if she were ever gone. With tears welling in her eyes, she tenderly reaches out to hold the heartbroken boy's hands, earnestly pleading with him to return home first so they can speak together in peace. Overcome by intense resentment, Ken violently slaps her hands away before she can offer any comfort. Screaming with bitter rage, he forbids her from ever uttering his late mother's name with what he calls her filthy mouth, leaving Cassia completely stunned and heartbroken as the young boy turns his head away in deep disgust. Clutching her mouth in breathless shock, Cassia gasps as Axion immediately steps forward to stand directly between them. Appalled by his son's disrespectful behavior, the Duke sternly reprimands Ken for taking such a harsh, venomous tone with his stepmother, demanding that he offer an immediate apology to her. As the relentless downpour continues to drench the secluded cemetery grounds, a suffocating silence falls across the grieving family. Standing rigid under the dark, stormy sky, neither father nor son is able to bridge the painful emotional chasm that has opened up between them. The memory transitions back to the estate dining hall, where a heavy, uncomfortable atmosphere hangs over their evening meal. As young Nick and Cassia sit quietly at the long table together, Axion turns toward his eldest son to break the silence and finally address Ken's bitter outburst from the graveyard the previous day. During the silent evening dinner, young Ken unexpectedly requests to leave the estate and join the Imperial Knights, confessing that his heart will find far more peace away from home. Axion gravely listens to his son's cold determination and accepts the decision, as an unbridgeable emotional rift fractures the family seated together. When Axion offers to write a formal recommendation letter for his enlistment, Cassia gasps and clutches her dress in breathless grief. Tears well in her eyes as she faces the painful truth that her presence has driven young Ken to abandon his family entirely. In the shadow of the stables, an explosive confrontation breaks out between the brothers. The elder brother grabs him tightly, but the younger brother snaps back with burning resentment, calling him the most despicable person of all. He demands to know if he ever did a single thing to protect Cassia after leaving, or if he simply watched her carry every heavy burden alone for years while pretending to be completely blameless. With a sharp, mocking smirk, the elder brother scoffs that neither of them ever truly attempted to reach out to her. He points out that fear and misplaced guilt toward their late mother kept both of their hearts closed off from the start. Mounting his horse to leave, he throws back one final, stinging insult, warning his brother to stop acting like a righteous hypocrite before galloping out into the darkness. Left standing alone in the vast, echoing corridor, the younger brother hangs his head under the crushing weight of his unspoken feelings. His voice trembling in the empty hall, he admits that he was finally preparing to change his path. Flashbacks flood back of him, standing in front of his mirror, practicing how to call her mother for the very first time, agonizing over how his long-overdue threat arrived far too late. Meanwhile, deep within the silent manor, the Duke sits completely solitary at his desk long past midnight. Warm lamplight spills across his paperwork as he stares into the shadows with a heavy, troubled expression. Across the hall, the younger child rests peacefully under his blanket, entirely unaware of the sorrowful rift widening among the family members. A haunting memory suddenly surfaces of Cassia sitting opposite him in the quiet evening, her soft eyes reflecting a gentle yet resolute sadness. She had asked whether he would immediately grant her a divorce once their contractual period came to an end, and back then he had casually agreed with a calm nod. Now, staring blankly into the quiet room, a painful realization strikes him as he wonders if that offhand response was the exact moment she determined to abandon their home and walk away forever. A sharp knock breaks the heavy silence of the study into the night. A loyal subordinate enters the dark room and kneels respectfully on the carpet, awaiting his master's orders. Still deeply tormented by his wife's sudden departure, the Duke delivers a stern, unyielding command to immediately track down the Duchess's true whereabouts without delay. He commands total secrecy throughout the estate, strictly warning the scout to ensure that no one else notices the investigation. The Duke demands a direct report the very second her location is confirmed. Resting his clasped hands beneath an intense, unblinking glare, his sharp eyes betray a desperate determination to uncover where she has gone. Meanwhile, far removed from the cold and lonely ducal estate, Cassia sits in peaceful solitude, gently cradling a warm cup of tea. As bright morning light fills the room, a soft, wistful smile graces her face. Looking out at the scenic coast, she marvels at how surreal it feels to finally return to this beautiful refuge after 7 long, painful years. Situated at the southernmost tip of the empire, the tranquil city of Laurentia holds the quiet seaside villa that once belonged to her late best friend Diana. Heartwarming memories of their youth instantly resurface, splashing the sparkling water together during sunlit vacations full of joy. It was those comforting recollections that naturally guided Cassia's steps back to this sanctuary, the moment she left the Duke's home to begin her new life. The soft chime of a bell echoes through the entryway, signaling an arriving visitor as a dark-booted foot steps across the threshold. Wearing a modest apron, Cassia turns around from the counter with a bright, friendly expression. She offers a warm welcome to her caller, completely unaware of the life-changing reunion that is about to take place. Shedding his heavy traveler's cloak, a remarkably handsome young man with shimmering silver hair and striking blue eyes smiles back at her with gentle warmth. Standing right inside her quiet shop is the third prince who vanished without a trace 7 years ago, the forgotten figure who once held her heart as her very first love. Standing behind the polished counter of her quiet seaside shop, Cassia greets the dark-cloaked traveler with warm professionalism. The tall customer steps forward to the counter and politely asks for a cup of hot coffee. Smiling pleasantly, she immediately sets to work, carefully pouring steaming water over the fresh coffee grounds, as the rich aroma fills the peaceful morning room. While waiting for his coffee to brew, the mysterious visitor turns away to explore the cozy shop. Moving lightly around the space, his eyes wander over the decorated walls until his gaze comes to a sudden halt, captivated by a framed painting resting against the wallpaper. Cassia gracefully sets down the finished drink, thanking him with a soft smile for waiting. Accepting the warm cup, the traveler hesitates before taking a sip and turns back toward the artwork. He points a finger toward the wall, asking her in a curious tone if she happens to know who painted such a striking piece. A faint blush touches Cassia's face as she timidly reveals that she created the piece herself, explaining that she only painted it to fill up an empty spot on the wall. The silver-haired prince brightens with genuine admiration, holding his cup as a warm smile breaks across his face. Looking at her intently, he marvels that her natural artistic talent is far too refined to be self-taught. Cassia offers a modest smile, confessing that she was actually debating whether to remove the painting entirely, worried that it didn't quite suit the atmosphere of her gallery. Hearing her talk about discarding it, the customer reacts with sudden urgency, loudly exclaiming that she must not get rid of it. Driven by impulse, he reaches across the counter and firmly clasps her hand, pulling her close and catching her completely off guard. Cassia turns to look up into his vibrant blue eyes as he leans down toward her face, his hood shifting. As their eyes lock in the quiet room, a sudden surge of breathlessness takes over, leaving Cassia staring wide-eyed at the handsome young prince who holds her hands so tightly. Earnestly pleading with her not to throw the artwork away, the mysterious prince holds her hand tight, pulling her close in a sudden moment of breathtaking intimacy. Caught off guard by his sudden warmth and intense gaze, Cassia gently stammers that she has not made any final decision to discard the piece anytime soon. Looking down at her captured wrist, Cassia politely asks him to let go, trying to ease the sudden awkward tension between them. Flustered by his own impulsive behavior, the silver-haired prince quickly steps back and stammers an apology, relieved as Cassia offers a gentle smile to reassure him that he merely startled her. He softly remarks that her breathtaking beauty is rarely seen in the Empire, leaving her momentarily stunned by his straightforward praise. Blushing slightly, Cassia notes that his own exceptionally handsome features are equally unique, prompting him to chuckle while explaining that his striking looks are why he stays hidden under his traveler's cloak. Extending his hand across the counter with gentle courtesy, he introduces himself as Alwyn, claiming to be a simple traveler exploring the southern realm. Cassia warmly clasps his hand in greeting, introducing herself as the owner of the gallery and offering him a genuine welcome to her peaceful coastal home. Gazing thoughtfully at her painting on the wall, Alwyn praises her extraordinary artistic gift, admiring how the monochromatic sea waves seem to absorb the light around them. He marvels at her ability to stir deep emotion, earnestly imploring her never to throw away a work of art that touches people's hearts so powerfully. Flashing a brilliant, radiant smile as he places his hand over his chest, Alwyn vows to visit her gallery every single day for the entire duration of his stay. Standing before her in the soft morning light, his unexpected presence brings a sense of warmth that promises to transform the quiet life she just began. Alwyn arrives at the serene greenhouse cafe once again, greeted warmly with his usual cup of fresh coffee. As they stand together by the counter, she wonders aloud if he ever grows tired of visiting every single day to look at the exact same painting. He simply smiles, replying that a true masterpiece offers new discoveries with every gaze. Setting down a freshly baked scone, she blushingly invites him to try it, explaining that she prepared a small practice batch after recent patrons asked for pastries. Though she worries whether it will suit his refined taste, Alwyn eagerly takes a bite without hesitation. He enthusiastically praises the rich apple flavor, but she playfully counters that he always compliments everything she makes and that she needs a more objective opinion. Alwyn earnestly defends his words, assuring her that his praise is completely genuine and that he never lies. Their cheerful conversation comes to an abrupt halt when the door opens and a group of uniformed knights marches into the establishment. As Alwyn discreetly pulls his dark hood low to conceal his face, the lead officer approaches the counter, announcing that they are searching for someone. Pulling out an official document, the knight reveals they are actively tracking the whereabouts of the third prince, who vanished without a trace 7 years ago. Holding out the printed portrait, he asks if the face looks familiar to her, leaving her staring back in breathless, stunned shock. Staring directly at the portrait of the missing third prince, she forces herself to maintain absolute composure. Without a hint of hesitation in her eyes, she quietly lies, insisting that she has never seen the man before. The lead knight concludes that their investigation here was entirely in vain. He remains completely oblivious to the fact that the very royal he seeks is standing mere steps away, hidden under a deep, dark hood. When the officer notes that a staggering 500 gold bounty awaits anyone who provides information, her heart races. She offers a polite nod as the group finally turns to leave the greenhouse. Just as relief begins to wash over her, a sudden, heavy tension grips the room. The lead officer pauses abruptly at the doorway, causing both her and Alwyn to freeze in terror. Pivoting back toward the mysterious stranger in the corner, the knight politely asks if he can pose a few questions to Alwyn. The unexpected request sends an immediate shockwave of anxiety through the room. Desperate to divert the knight's attentions before Alwyn is forced to reveal his face, she abruptly interrupts. Clutching her hands tightly, she blurts out that she has freshly baked scones sitting in the kitchen. Quickly offering to pack up a batch for the officers to share on their journey, she flashes a warm, persuasive smile. Her sudden hospitality leaves the young knight flustered and completely thrown off track. Delighted by the freshly baked treats, the officer happily enjoys his snack outside before suddenly coming to a halt. Gazing back through the glass at the cafe owner, a strange feeling takes hold as he wonders if he has met her somewhere before. Inside, Alwyn anxiously peeks around his hood until she catches him off guard and asks what he is doing. He hastily dismisses her concern, but when she suddenly asks if he has ever met the third prince, Alwyn completely loses his composure and stammers in panic. While serving him warm tea, she thoughtfully remarks that, despite it being an old childhood portrait, the missing prince possessed an extraordinarily handsome face. Her unexpected praise leaves Alwyn desperately sipping his drink to conceal his trembling face. Pausing for a quiet moment, she asks Alwyn if he would report the missing royal if their paths ever crossed. She playfully hints that 500 gold is quite an enticing fortune, sending a sudden wave of panic crashing over him. Softening her expression, she quickly reassures him that she was only teasing. She confides that she could never betray the prince because she deeply understands the heartache of someone who had to run away from where they were meant to be. Touched by her quiet empathy, Alwyn gently suggests that she could become the prince's friend instead, yet her gentle refusal, that forming such a bond would only become a heavy burden, leaves him standing in breathless shock. Calling the missing prince a potential burden strikes a deeply painful chord with Alwyn. Desperate to soften her harsh impression, he stammers that the third prince is exceedingly wealthy and handsome, arguing there would be no harm in becoming close. Yet she calmly counters that she never judges people by their fortune or looks. She candidly adds that rumors frame the missing prince as an unpredictable troublemaker whom she has zero interest in meeting. Her blunt rejection hits Alwyn like a physical blow, leaving him clutching his forehead in utter dismay while she watches his sudden distress with growing confusion. Puzzled by his intense focus on the royal, she subtly glances over and teasingly asks if he is just eager to claim the 500 gold bounty. Caught off guard, Alwyn flusteredly waves his hands and laughs it off, claiming his purse has grown rather light from his long journey. Eager to escape the overwhelming tension, Alwyn hurriedly checks the time and stammers that he has urgent matters to attend to before promising to return tomorrow. Standing alone in the quiet greenhouse cafe, she thoughtfully touches her neck, wondering if her light-hearted teasing accidentally hurt his feelings. As dusk settles over the quiet countryside, Alwyn lies awake in his room, staring aimlessly at the ceiling. The memory of her harsh words suddenly brings him sitting up in distress, sighing deeply into the quiet room as he wonders if he is truly destined to be nothing more than a burden to her. As the night leaves, he pauses outside with a lingering sense that he has seen the cafe owner somewhere before. Inside, Alwyn peeks around his hood until she catches him, prompting him to flusteredly pull it back and brush off her concern. Serving Alwyn warm tea, she casually asks if he has ever met the third prince. He completely loses his composure and stammers in panic, desperately sipping his drink to conceal his trembling face while she warmly praises the prince's handsome portrait. Pausing thoughtfully, she asks Alwyn if he would turn the missing royal in if their paths ever crossed. The unexpected question creates a sudden quiet between them as he stands silently holding his tea. She playfully hints that the 500 gold bounty is a tempting fortune, sending a shock of dread through Alwyn. Seeing his pale face, she quickly laughs it off as a joke and reassures him that she would never report the prince. Softening her expression, she confides that she could never betray him, because she deeply understands the heartache of someone who felt forced to run away from where they belonged. Touched by her quiet empathy, Alwyn suggests that she could become the prince's friend instead of turning him in, yet her gentle refusal that forming such a bond would only feel like a heavy burden leaves him standing in wide-eyed shock. Stung by the word burden, Alwyn flusteredly argues that the third prince is wealthy and handsome, so befriending him would have no downside. However, she calmly counters that she never judges people by their fortune or looks, leaving him utterly speechless. Her blunt refusal to associate with an unpredictable troublemaker hits Alwyn like a physical blow. As he clutches his head in utter dismay, she looks back at him with growing confusion, wondering why he has been speaking so much about the third prince. Gazing at him with curious eyes, she teasingly asks if he is just eager to claim that enticing 500 gold bounty. Caught completely off guard, Alwyn flusteredly waves his hands and laughs it off, claiming his purse has grown rather light from long travel. Eager to escape the overwhelming tension, Alwyn stammers that he has urgent business to take care of before hastily bidding her farewell. Standing alone in the quiet cafe, she thoughtfully touches her neck, wondering if her teasing accidentally hurt his feelings. As dusk settles over the peaceful countryside, Alwyn lies awake alone in his room, staring aimlessly up at the quiet ceiling. The painful memory of her calling the prince a burden suddenly brings him sitting up in distress. Sighing deeply into the darkness, he wonders if he is truly destined to be nothing more than a heavy burden to her. Inside the quiet training hall, Ken pauses in sharp disbelief when his companion questions if he simply misremembered a familiar face. Though his friend doubts the encounter, the unexpected mention of his stepmother creates an immediate heavy tension between them, forcing Ken to confront news he never anticipated hearing. Jacob remains completely confident in what he saw, explaining that after thinking it over carefully, there is no room for doubt. He firmly confirms that the woman living quietly in town is none other than the former Duchess of Fidrian, bringing a long-buried reality back to the surface. When Jacob suggests visiting the gallery cafe she now runs, Ken defensively turns away and questions why he should ever go. Bending down to retrieve his training sword, Jacob warns him against living with bitter remorse, admitting how deeply he suffered after failing to value his own stepmother before she passed away. Holding his wooden sword tightly, Jacob urges Ken to have a real conversation with her while he still has the chance. But Ken coldly rejects the heartfelt advice, declaring this a private family matter and walking away to make his own choices without interference. Jacob watches with anxious concern as Ken turns his back and walks out of the training hall alone. Despite his defensive front, the quiet weight of the encounter lingers over Ken as he steps into the corridor. Meanwhile, nestled beneath bright open skies and lush trees, the serene new gallery cafe stands as a peaceful haven, far removed from the unresolved grievances and heavy shadows of the past. Inside the sunlit cafe, the former Duchess stands beside Alwyn, looking over the newly written dessert menu with a cheerful smile. She notices that all the featured pastries match the items he enjoyed during taste testing. With genuine warmth, she thanks Alwyn for his invaluable advice, happily embracing this bright chapter of her new life. Alwyn expresses his heartfelt gratitude for getting to taste test so many delicious pastries during her shop preparations. However, as he carefully scans the finalized dessert menu board inside the quiet cafe, a sudden curiosity takes over, prompting him to ask why there isn't a single cake listed among her offered items. A melancholic shadow touches her eyes as she hesitates, quietly admitting that she simply has no desire to bake cakes anymore. When Alwyn asks why, she turns her head and offers a simple excuse, explaining that making cakes takes far too much delicate time and effort. Sensing her subtle discomfort, Alwyn gracefully changes the subject with a bright smile, picking out his treats for the day and mentioning he will save the lemon madeleines for tomorrow. His casual remark suddenly reminds her of her schedule, prompting her to speak up. She informs him with a calm smile that the gallery cafe will actually be closed tomorrow because there is somewhere she urgently needs to go. Though Alwyn nods and accepts her decision, he turns away with a subtle sigh, quietly remarking what a shame it is to miss visiting. The following day, under bright sunlight and drifting clouds, she turns the key in the door and steps outside in a beautiful outfit for her excursion. But as she walks along the paved stone path, her steps abruptly halt when an inexplicable feeling of being watched catches her completely off guard. Standing still beneath the vibrant green trees, she looks around intently and glances up at the clear blue sky. She questions whether that sharp sensation of a hidden presence was real or just her mind playing tricks, ultimately deciding to brush off the strange feeling and continue her walk. Tucked back into the dark shadows behind a wooden wall, Ken watches her closely as she moves down the sunlit street, his dark eyes filled with serious contemplation. Observing her serene figure in the distance, he is forced to admit that Jacob was telling the absolute truth all along. As the horse-drawn carriage rolls gracefully along the peaceful countryside path, she sits quietly inside, watching the sunlit greenery drift past the open window. Shielded beneath her broad-brimmed sun hat, she embarks on a quiet boat journey toward the distant coast, her heart heavy with reflection as the carriage steadily carries her closer to her destination. Memories of the past flood her mind, taking her back to a cherished afternoon spent beside her late best friend, Diana. When Diana had warmly invited her to spend time at her private villa, she had hesitantly asked if it was truly all right for her to come along. But Diana had only laughed with radiant warmth, reassuring her that she was welcome to visit hundreds, even thousands of times whenever she wished. The carriage driver's polite voice gently breaks her deep reverie to announce that they have finally arrived at the estate. Stepping down from the carriage in her elegant dress, she steps onto the sun-drenched grounds, looking around to take in the serene beauty of the coastal villa where so many unforgettable moments were once shared. Standing alone on the sandy shore beneath the bright blue sky, she gazes out at the sparkling ocean waters and softly whispers Diana's name in her heart. Everything about the beautiful coastal landscape remains completely untouched, looking exactly as it did all those years ago. The only difference now is the bitter truth that her cherished friend is no longer standing by her side. Without warning, a sudden gust of strong ocean wind sweeps across the beach, catching her completely off guard and blowing her hat right off her head. She turns around in dismay as her long dark hair flies in the breeze, only for a finely gloved hand to deftly catch the hat mid-air before it can drift away. Spinning around to express her gratitude to the thoughtful stranger, her voice falters as a wave of sudden shock washes over her. Looking up in utter disbelief, she finds herself face to face with Michael, who smiles down at her while holding her hat in his hand, turning a solitary visit into a breathtaking and completely unexpected reunion by the sea. As the gentle ocean waves lap against the sandy shore, Michael sits down beside her and softly breaks the silence, asking how she has been keeping. He admits that rumors about her sudden departure have already begun circulating through high society, leaving him deeply concerned about her well-being. She turns to him with subtle surprise, acknowledging how quickly rumors spread among the nobility. Gazing down at her with genuine earnestness, Michael gently presses further, asking why she ultimately made the painful choice to walk away from the Duke's estate. With a calm and quiet voice, she reveals that her long promise to Diana is finally complete, having protected and raised the children until they came of age. Michael listens thoughtfully before asking what brought her all the way to this isolated coastal home. Gazing out at the sparkling horizon, she confides that she felt an irresistible need to visit this place at least once. For her, this serene coast remains the sole sanctuary where her cherished memories of Diana remain completely untouched, keeping their shared past alive. A bittersweet shadow falls over Michael's face as he looks at her, quietly wondering what would have happened if he had tried harder to change her mind back then. Leaning in close, he asks if she might have chosen not to go through with that marriage. His haunting question drags her back to the afternoon of her wedding 7 long years ago. Standing beside her while she sat dressed in her bridal gown, Michael had looked down with desperate intensity, pleading with her to abandon the wedding and run away with him. Standing beside her on the sunlit shore, he gazes down with a quiet, lingering earnestness and asks if she truly will not choose the path of marriage once more. The delicate question hangs softly in the warm coastal breeze, unexpectedly reaching into tender memories she had long buried deep within her heart. His unexpected question instantly pulls her back to the quiet morning of her wedding 7 years ago. Dressed in her ornate white bridal gown, she had turned around in pure astonishment as he entered her dressing room. his eyes filled with desperate urgency as he softly begged her to run away with him. He had confessed that to honor the final promise made to his sister, he could never stand idly by and watch her enter a cold, loveless marriage. Begging her to abandon the wedding and escape somewhere far away together, his frantic proposal had left her standing frozen beneath her veil in stunned silence. Returning to the present, Cassia turns her gaze toward the rhythmic crashing of the sea tide. She softly insists there is no reason to dredge up old memories when 7 long years have already slipped away, firmly holding to the belief that she must never regret the solemn choice she made back then. Sitting side by side on the grassy hill beneath the clear blue sky, she candidly admits that she was far too consumed by her own heavy burdens back then to ever learn what became of him. With gentle curiosity, she turns toward him and softly asks how life has been with his wife. A faint blush touches his cheek as he averts his eyes, quietly dropping a stunning revelation by confessing that he never married at all. Cassia recoils in complete, wide-eyed astonishment, her breath catching in her throat as he sheepishly rubs his neck and admits that he simply missed his chance to marry. Assuming his status as head of an earldom came with heavy expectations, Cassia remarks that his family must have pressured him endlessly. Yet he softly explains that after his sister passed away and his parents fell ill, he had no luxury for romance. Having never met anyone he truly wished to wed, he even considered adopting an heir instead. Michael agrees with a faint smile, yet as he looks directly into her eyes, he turns the tender question right back to her. The sudden intimacy in his gaze catches Cassia completely off guard, leaving her staring back at him in startled, blushing silence. He clarifies that after hearing she had left the estate following her divorce, he simply wondered if she intended to remarry. Realizing he was merely asking about her plans for the future, Cassia feels the sudden tension melt away into sheepish relief. Pointing out that she is single once more, he listens as Cassia softly shakes her head, insisting there is no one she wishes to marry either. But looking down at her, his tone softens into a quiet, breathtaking confession, as he reveals that for him, there was never anyone until now. Resting his cheek against his hand with an earnest smile, he softly corrects himself, confessing that to be precise, he was actually rejected. Cassia tilts her head in complete astonishment, utterly bewildered as to who could have possibly turned him away. Leaning in so close that the distance between them vanishes, his warm gaze locks onto hers as he reminds her of that desperate morning 7 years ago when he asked her to run away together, quietly pointing out that she was the one who refused. The forgotten memory floods back to the quiet morning of her wedding. Dressed in her bridal gown beneath a sheer white veil, she had acknowledged his feelings with gentle sadness but firmly refused his hand, determined above all else to honor her beloved friend Diana's final wish. Michael acknowledges her past resolve with a soft, lingering gaze. Yet as the warm coastal breeze sweeps around them, he gazes directly into her eyes and asks what her heart holds now, quietly asking if she has any desire at all for love or marriage in her new life. His delicate question hits her like a sudden wave, leaving her standing in flustered silence. A bright blush instantly floods her cheeks as her heart pounds wildly beneath his earnest, unblinking look, completely shattering her usual calm composure. Flustered by the overwhelming intimacy, Cassia quickly excuses herself, announcing that she must head home right away. Turning briskly to escape his gaze, she takes a few hurried steps before her feet abruptly grind to a halt on the sandy ground. Gazing out toward the open horizon with her back turned, she softly tells him that she runs a modest little gallery right at the entrance of Laurentia village. Turning her face slightly, she hesitates before softly asking him to visit if he ever finds the time. With her face burning bright red, she hurries away, her rapid footsteps creating fresh tracks along the dirt. Michael stays behind in quiet reflection, his eyes steadily following her retreating figure as the distance between them stretches out once again. As she rushes off, an astonishing realization suddenly dawns on her. Could it be that Michael had harbored romantic feelings for her all along? Caught completely off guard by the staggering thought, her shoe catches on a stone, sending her losing her balance with a sharp gasp until a firm hand swiftly catches her waist. Michael catches her securely in a sweeping embrace, holding her steady while softly asking if she is all right. Staring up into his eyes from mere inches away, her pulse races uncontrollably as she realizes that some feelings and the way her heart reacts to him have remained entirely unchanged across all these long years. As she sits on the sunlit shore after stumbling, a gentle shadow falls over her. Michael reaches out with an immaculate lace handkerchief, softly asking if she is all right and warmly encouraging her to take it, his eyes filled with quiet, protective concern for her well-being. The sudden closeness sends a deep blush straight to her cheeks, leaving her breath caught in her throat beneath his intent gaze. Quickly pulling herself back to regain her composure, she stammers a flustered expression of gratitude and turns to leave, desperate to put distance between them before her pounding heart betrays her flustered state. Her attempt to rush away is instantly cut short as a sharp pain shoots through her foot, forcing her to stumble with a pained gasp. Spotting her injury, Michael kneels down before her without a single moment's hesitation, gently examining her leg as he softly points out that she has sprained her ankle. Before she can react, he sweeps her up into his arms in a sudden, effortless carry. Cassia flushes, bright red, and frantically demands to be put down, but Michael simply smiles, explaining that they must treat her sprain at the nearby villa first. Pointing out that she can barely walk in her condition, he holds her securely until she softly yields to his gentle insistence. Carrying her along the bright ocean shore, Cassia rests against his chest, staring up at his handsome profile in stunned silence. The rhythmic crashing of the tide fades into the background as she feels the steady warmth of his embrace, completely overwhelmed by how tenderly he looks down at her as they walk together. Michael gazes down at her with a soft, affectionate smile that melts away her remaining defenses. In his warm, earnest look, she senses an unspoken devotion that 7 long years of separation could never diminish, leaving her heart racing uncontrollably beneath the vast blue sky. Looking down with a gentle, affectionate smile, Michael offers her a quiet reassurance beneath the clear sky. Holding her close as he walks along the sun-washed shoreline, he carries her securely in his arms, leaving Cassia resting against his chest as the ocean waves crash against the sand. High above the sun-drenched gardens, the glass-roofed shop rests quietly under the bright afternoon sun. Steps slow down as bandaged ankles move carefully across the floor, carrying a quiet stillness into the bright room. Cassia stands near the glass windows, staring off into a quiet daze while bathed in warm daylight. Her peaceful reverie breaks the moment her companion softly calls her name, prompting her to turn around. She glances back in surprise, meeting his searching eyes as he pauses beside a painting on the wall. He gently asks if she has fallen for someone, catching her completely off guard as a rosy flush spreads across her cheeks. Gazing at the vibrant floral canvas, he points out how her palette has shifted to bright yellows, soft sky blues, and warm pinks she never touched before. He leans closer, eager to know who could have stirred her composure so deeply. His hand freezes as he sets his teacup down, staring in total shock when she admits to encountering her first love. Blushing with a gentle smile, Cassia confirms she ran into her childhood crush by pure chance while visiting the beach. Seated across the table, he asks if this unexpected reunion was why she closed her shop early that afternoon. When she admits the truth, he sags in silent dismay at his intuition, quickly fluttering his hands to laugh off his lingering unease. His expression softens as he looks at her, confessing his earnest curiosity to discover what kind of man could alter her art so dramatically. Right as the unspoken tension lingers, the shop doorbell rings overhead. Cassia turns toward the doorway to welcome her incoming guest. But the greeting stalls in her throat the instant Count Mikhail steps inside. Dressed in elegant nobleman's attire adorned with intricate ruffles and a gemmed brooch, he greets her with a soft, affectionate smile that brings a deep blush to her cheeks. Yet standing right behind her, Arwen glares in sharp disapproval, dark annoyance clouding his face as he watches them. Overjoyed by his unexpected visit, Cassia steps closer to Mikhail, thrilled that he actually came to see her. When Mikhail's glance shifts inquiringly toward the silver-haired man standing beside her, Cassia introduces Arwen as a regular customer who frequently visits her shop. She then turns back to present Mikhail as Count Mikhail, head of House Allison, formally bringing the two men face-to-face for the very first time. Arwen steps forward with calm composure, extending his open hand and remarking that it is a true honor to cross paths with a nobleman of such high standing in a place like this. Mikhail clasps his hand with an easy, polite smile, returning the formal courtesy and expressing equal pleasure at meeting him. Though reluctant inside to walk away, Arwen suppresses his true feelings and decides he should give them bare for space. Announcing his sudden departure to a surprised Cassia, he offers her a bright, reassuring smile, explaining that he has already finished his coffee and spent plenty of time admiring her beautiful new paintings. The moment he turns his back to Cassia, Arwen's pleasant mask vanishes into a sharp, menacing glare as he coldly tells the two of them to enjoy their time together. Mikkel bows slightly and offers a polite word of thanks, completely oblivious to the intense, lingering hostility burning in Arwen's eyes as he turns and steps away. Restoring his gentle demeanor, Arwen bids Cassia a warm farewell until tomorrow and steps out through the glass doors. As the shop settles back into quiet stillness, Mikhail stares after him with a serious, suspicious expression, softly asking Cassia just how long that mysterious regular customer has been living in the quiet village. Cassia recalls that Arwen only moved to the quiet village about a month ago. Turning back toward her guest, she admits her genuine delight that he actually came to visit her shop. Mikhail offers a soft, affectionate smile, confessing he was simply dying to know what kind of coffee she would brew for him. Eager to welcome him, Cassia invites him to take a seat while she steps over to the counter to start a fresh brew. She serves the steaming cup with graceful care, and as Mikhail takes a slow sip, he warmly praises both her delicious coffee and the breathtaking floral artwork adorning her shop walls. Seated comfortably across the table from her, Mikhail gently asks if her life has finally settled down after everything that took place. Cassia's bright composure softens into quiet, lingering uncertainty, confessing that a part of her still feels as though her beloved friend Diana is alive out there somewhere in the world. Gazing across at her with deep, sincere empathy, Mikhail remarks that Cassia must have loved Diana more than anyone else in the world. He softly notes that if her devotion hadn't been so profound, there is simply no way she ever would have agreed to accept such a monumental request. A nostalgic, tender smile touches Cassia's face as she fondly remembers her late best friend. She reflects that Diana was simply the kind of person who was born to be loved, someone who effortlessly held the undivided affection and admiration of everyone around her throughout her entire life. Mikhail gently agrees with her sentiments, reflecting on how deeply adored Diana was wherever she went, right from the time she was a little girl. He fondly remembers her as an extraordinarily bright, sparkling soul who illuminated every place she visited. Cassia turns her soft gaze back onto Mikhail, reassuring him that the very same could be said for him. Catching his surprised look, she lightens the atmosphere with a warm smile, teasing that now that time has passed, she can finally admit how incredibly popular he was among all the young ladies in those days. Cassia lightens the mood by playfully teasing Mikhail about his high popularity among young ladies back then, but he quickly turns the compliment right back toward her. Her eyes widen in complete surprise as he softly insists that the very same could be said for her, catching her entirely off guard with his sudden warmth. Looking across at her with tender sincerity, Mikhail softly confesses that back in those days, she used to shine much brighter than anyone else around them. He gazes at her affectionately, gently assuring her that even if she fails to realize it herself, she remains just as breathtakingly radiant now as she ever was. Deeply touched and flustered by his earnest praise, Cassia blushes with a bright smile, admitting what a true honor it is to hear such sweet words from him. Reaching gently across the table, Mikhail tenderly clasps both of her hands within his own, softly calling out her name with quiet, lingering warmth. Gazing at her across the sunlit tea-house room, Mikhail's soft tone turns deeply solemn, as he gently observes that she has never truly broken free from the overwhelming grief of losing Diana. He points out that even though 7 long years have passed, a part of her remains completely trapped on that fateful day. With a sudden, intense gaze fixed directly upon her, Mikhail tells her it is still not too late, promising that if it is truly what she wants, he will completely erase all of her painful memories. Cassia freezes in place, staring back at him in utter shock at his unbelievable and startling proposition. Standing beside Cassia on the morning of her wedding, Mikhail breaks the heavy silence with a sudden, desperate plea. He begs her to abandon everything and run away with him to a place far beyond their reach, unable to conceal the deep longing behind his unexpected request as he waits intently for her reaction. Catching her breath at his sudden proposition, Cassia softly whispers his name in utter shock. Though she feels profoundly grateful for his unexpected kindness and devotion, she gently turns him down, remaining steadfast in her solemn vow to honor Diana's final wish rather than choosing her own personal freedom and relief. Acknowledging her unwavering commitment, Mikhail's gloved hand rests still on the wooden surface as he accepts her decision with quiet solemnity. Yet he refuses to stand by while she suffers, revealing that another unexpected path remains open if she truly wishes to break free from the painful obligations binding her. Mikhail steps closer to her, proposing an extraordinary solution designed to wipe away her lingering sorrow forever. He offers to use his power to erase all her memories of Diana, along with every painful promise and heavy burden she has struggled to shoulder alone throughout these long and agonizing years. Cassia turns around in complete astonishment, questioning what he could possibly mean by such an unbelievable claim. Facing her steadily in the soft light streaming through the large window, Mikhail confirms his words with quiet calm, explaining to her that he possesses the rare magical ability required to erase a person's memories. Hearing his explanation, Cassia recalls Diana once mentioning that an ancestor of the Allison family had married a powerful mage, occasionally passing down rare magical gifts to their descendants. Touching her chin thoughtfully, she gazes back at him in wonder, having never once imagined that Mikhail himself had inherited such extraordinary magic. Meeting her wide, searching gaze, Mikhail reveals that his magical abilities awakened long ago, though he chose to keep them hidden from the world until now. Believing his power manifested specifically for this moment, he leaves the ultimate choice entirely in her hands, offering to erase every trace of Diana if she truly desires it. Mikhail speaks with blunt, painful honesty, reminding Cassia that Diana has already passed away. Reaching out toward her in quiet desperation, he earnestly begs her not to sacrifice her own entire youth and future merely to fulfill a solemn promise to the dead. He refuses to watch her surrender her life to endless obligation and hidden grief when another path lies right before her. Overwhelmed by the intensity of his plea, Cassia tightly grips the delicate fabric of her gown, softly whispering his name in breathless shock. Turning her face toward the soft morning light filtering through the window, she quietly insists that choosing this path was her own true desire, reminding Mikhail of just how profoundly Diana had impacted her life when she was completely alone. Thinking back to her past, Cassia fondly remembers a time when she possessed no family, no real friends, and no place to call home. Diana had opened her arms to her, bestowing unconditional love, comfort, and purpose upon her empty life. Because of everything Diana gave her, Cassia vows she will never regret dedicating her existence to her memory, asking Mikhail not to worry. Bringing his thoughts back to their present conversation at the tea table, Mikhail confesses that from the moment of her wedding until now, not a single day has gone by without him living in agonizing regret. Tightly clasping his hands before her, he laments that he did not run away with her back then, insisting that he now has the power to rescue her. Determined not to repeat his past mistake, Mikhail stands up from the table, tenderly taking both of her hands into his and kneeling right beside her chair. Looking up at her with profound sincerity, he promises never to abandon her again, urging her to call upon him whenever she needs help and offering to erase her painful memories so she can finally move forward. Cassia looks down at him with a soft, tearful smile, deeply moved by his tender devotion and the secret protection he has offered her for so long. Yet, despite feeling immensely grateful for his kindness, she gently slides her fingers away from his warm hold, firmly refusing to erase a single memory of Diana, choosing instead to honor her past rather than forget it. Cassia meets his gaze with a serene, unwavering expression, softly declaring that she never wishes to forget Diana now or ever. Instead of erasing her pain through magic, she intends to visit the cherished places they shared, look through old photographs, and gradually overwrite her deepest sorrow with warm reflections. To her, these precious recollections are the final gift her beloved friend left behind. With quiet resolve, she gently slides her hands away from his grasp, choosing to honor her past. Seeing her firm determination, Mikhail yields with deep respect, promising that he will never press the matter of erasing her memories again if she wishes to keep them. Softening his posture, he extends his open hand out toward her with earnest vulnerability. He offers a brand new promise, asking her to let him stay close by her side and help her through whatever journey she chooses to pursue from this day forward. Solemnly pledging to remain by her side in Diana's stead, Mikhail takes her hand into a warm, reassuring clasp, overwhelmed by his enduring devotion and willingness to protect her without any conditions. Cassia smiles tearfully and gives him her quiet assent, finally allowing him back into her life after all these years of separation. As their intense conversation gradually draws to a close, Cassia offers a bright, refreshing smile, easing the heavy atmosphere as she mentions how much she enjoyed their quiet afternoon together and the delicious coffee. Looking back at her with immense relief and affection, Mikhail softly agrees that he cherished every moment of their reunion as well. However, just before they say their final goodbyes, Mikhail suddenly pauses and calls out her name, his expression shifting into subtle concern. He hesitantly inquires about the silver-haired man from earlier, asking if she and Alwyn are truly close. When Cassia candidly admits that they share a close bond, Mikhail's gaze darkens with protective caution, earnestly warning her to keep her distance since Alwyn's background remains completely unknown. Cassia offers a light-hearted smile at his lingering worry, explaining that Alwyn was the very first friend to give her kindness and companionship after she arrived in this town, insisting there is no need for him to feel anxious. Reassured by her bright, confident demeanor, Mikhail's tension melts away and he softly yields, promising to trust her judgment while keeping a watchful eye over her happiness. Pacing along the quiet cobblestone path, Alwyn bites his fingers in agonized regret, desperately scolding himself for being such a fool. He spirals into dramatic frustration over leaving Cassia and Mikhail completely alone, agonizing over the fact that he practically pushed her straight into another man's arms. Clutching his face as a wave of realization washes over him, Alwyn's eyes widen with unsettling suspicion. He can only watch the quiet distance in silence, haunted by the dreadful thought that this mysterious newcomer might actually be Cassia's long-lost first love. Deep in thought, Alwyn ponders whether he should simply head back to the flower shop to check on them. But before he can take another step, the crisp sound of approaching footsteps echoes across the stone floor right behind him, causing him to freeze in place. A calm, formal voice suddenly cuts through the heavy silence, greeting him with a title he had kept hidden for years, Your Highness Adolf. Alwyn turns his head back in complete shock, his breath catching as his secret identity is unexpectedly exposed. Standing behind him is a poised blonde nobleman, who gracefully places his hand over his chest in a respectful, customary bow. Turning to face his unexpected caller, Alwyn quickly clears his expression, looking at the familiar figure with quiet surprise as he recognizes the man before him. Addressing the nobleman back as Count Allen, Alwyn meets his gaze under the warm sunlight. The Count smiles back knowingly, bringing their unexpected reunion to a tense and compelling end. Over a freshly poured cup of tea, the silver-haired prince warmly greets his unexpected guest, expressing deep gratitude for making the long journey out to his secluded hideaway. Taking in the modest surroundings, Count Allison confesses his complete surprise, having had no idea the prince was staying so remarkably close to home. Count Allison admits just how stunned he was to locate him, recalling how everyone believed the prince had severed all contact after leaving the imperial palace on a sudden journey. Gently sipping his tea, the prince explains that he only recently returned, having spent years traveling foreign lands to evade his relentless pursuers. Setting his cup down on the table, Count Allison asks if his father and brothers are well, pressing whether the prince truly understands the gravity of his prolonged absence. With the emperor officially declaring him missing, everyone has been frantic with worry, a harsh reality the prince accepts with a quiet, somber nod. When the prince gently asks after his mother, Count Allison reassures him that the empress continues to hold the court together with resolute strength, faithfully believing in his return. Hearing of her unwavering composure, a faint, knowing smile touches the prince's lips as he softly praises her remarkable dignity. Count Allison's expression turns grave as he directly questions when the prince plans on returning to his rightful place. He firmly urges him to end this prolonged childish wandering, appealing directly to his sense of duty for the sake of all the people who still wait anxiously for him. A heavy shadow falls over the prince's eyes as he quietly tells Count Allison that he couldn't possibly understand his plight. He recalls the suffocating, unbearable burden of being forced into an oppressive royal role that never truly fit him, right from the moment he was crowned as a child. The prince insists that high royal status was never meant for someone like him, expressing complete satisfaction with his quiet, secluded existence. But Count Allison remains unshakable, reminding him that no matter how fiercely he denies his bloodline, he will always remain a true prince of the empire. Using politeness to mask his firm refusal, the prince excuses himself to brew more tea, reiterating that he has no intention of returning anytime soon. But as he steps away, Count Allison softly drops a single name into the silence, asking if Cassia is the real reason he refuses to return. A sudden, sharp tension fills the quiet room as the prince spins around, demanding to know what Count Alison's own relationship with Cassia is. When the count coolly tries to dismiss his personal affairs, the prince discards his gentle demeanor, using his full royal authority to command an answer. With a quiet gravity in his gaze as her memory surfaces, Count Alison confesses that Cassia is a woman he has held more precious than his very life for a long, long time. An amused, knowing smile touches the prince's lips. He presses whether his frequent visits to Cassia's gallery bother him, openly questioning why the count didn't just expose his true identity to her, knowing full well that such a revelation would have forced her to distance herself immediately. Count Alison insists he had no intention of interfering in their connection, but his tone hardens into a stark warning as he cautions the prince never to cross the line with her. White-knuckled anger grips the prince as his hand tightens around the handle, stunned by such unbelievable presumption from a noble. Yet Count Alison stands his ground without flinching, boldly declaring that he does not care if he is seen as forgetting his place when it comes to Cassia. Count Alison makes his final ultimatum crystal clear, firmly declaring that if the prince is approaching Cassia out of mere idle curiosity, he will not simply stand by and allow it. The silver-haired prince receives the nobleman's stern warning in heavy, watchful silence, his guarded eyes locked onto Count Alison as the dark, suffocating weight of their confrontation settles deep between them. Offering a smooth, polite word of thanks for the tea, Count Alison calmly turns on his heel and takes his leave, bringing their intense standoff to a quiet, abrupt close. Left entirely alone in the secluded cottage with his teapot still in hand, the prince softly murmurs to himself that this situation has become unexpectedly complicated. Yet as a vivid memory of Cassia's bright, beautiful smile fills his mind, a dark, intrigued expression settles over his face, confessing that Count Alison's possessive warning has only served to spark his curiosity even further. Meanwhile, back inside her own private quarters, Cassia stands before her vanity mirror, nervously smoothing down her dress, flusteredly asking herself if she is trying a bit too hard today. Memories of the silver-haired prince gently asking to return tomorrow and share more quiet moments together flood her thoughts, bringing a deep blush to her cheeks as her heart flutters out of control at the lingering memory. Suddenly catching sight of the small clock sitting on her desk, Cassia gasps in shock as she realizes how late the morning has gotten and that she must hurry to open her shop immediately. Swept up in a flurry of panic, she frantically rushes down the wooden stairwell as fast as her heels will carry her, but her rapid steps lose footing, sending her stumbling headlong down the floor. Still wondering why her heart has been fluttering so wildly since yesterday, Cassia rushes downstairs to open her shop. But as she stumbles into the main room, she freezes upon seeing a young man waiting inside. She gasps in total disbelief when he turns around, revealing her former stepson, Nick. Before she can even process his unexpected arrival, Nick rushes forward and catches her, pulling her into a tight, desperate embrace. Stunned by the overwhelming emotion in his sudden reunion, Cassia stands completely frozen in his arms as he buries his face against her shoulder. Flipping the sign to closed, Cassia sits down across from him, watching in silence as Nick quietly eats a slice of homemade cake. Blushing softly with a gentle smile, he praises how truly delicious it is, his voice filled with warmth as he calls her mother once more. As Cassia modestly mentions that she simply used whatever ingredients she had, heavy tears suddenly drop onto Nick's plate. Overwhelmed by years of hidden grief and regret, he hangs his head, weeping softly as he admits how foolishly immature he had been for taking so long to seek her out. Tears stream down Nick's face as he softly confesses that every birthday cake she had ever lovingly baked for him was truly delicious. Overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing wave of regret, his trembling fingers lose their grip, sending his fork clattering noisily against the table. Reaching out to clasp Cassia's hand in a tight, desperate hold, Nick tearfully apologizes for pretending not to notice the intense pain and solitude she endured for so long. He earnestly begs her for one more chance to prove himself as a good son, pleading with her to finally return home. Cassia freezes in profound shock, her breath catching in her throat at his desperate entreaty. The sheer weight of his sincere plea to be her son again shakes her to her core, leaving her completely stunned by how deeply he truly regrets his past actions. Gazing up at her through lingering tears, Nick hangs his head in quiet repentance, anxiously searching her face for any glimmer of forgiveness. He remains completely at her mercy, praying that their fractured relationship can finally begin to heal. Inside a quiet sunlit tea room, Nick sits directly across from her, tenderly clasping her hand as if holding onto a fragile hope. Lowering her gaze with a quiet, somber stillness, she looks away for a brief moment before gently speaking his name, preparing to deliver the harsh reality. Slowly pulling her hand back out of his grasp, she looks him in the eye with unshakable resolve, offering a quiet apology as she firmly announces that she has no intention of ever returning. Utterly shocked by her decisive words, Nick gazes at her in stunned disbelief. Struggling to comprehend her refusal, Nick urgently demands to know why, revealing that his father explained everything about her entering the duchy solely to protect them. He clings to that revelation, desperate to understand how she could walk away after devoting so much of her life to their family. Softly closing her eyes with calm composure, she acknowledges that protecting them was indeed her sole reason for entering the duchy all those years ago. But now that he and his sibling have grown into full adults, she quietly reminds him that her long duty to their family is finally finished. Standing up from her chair, she tells Nick it is time for him to return home to his worried father. Caught off guard by her abrupt farewell, Nick reacts in a flash, slamming his hands against the table as he angrily shouts that he will never go back alone. Tears stream down Nick's face as he cries out that ever since 7 years ago, she has been a real mother to him in every way. Clenching his fists until his hands tremble, he refuses to lose her, fiercely declaring that he will bring her home no matter what. Overwhelmed by emotion, Nick turns away and rushes toward the exit to catch his breath, ignoring her anxious calls behind him. As he bursts through the cafe doorway, he collides head-on with a tall, silver-haired gentleman standing outside, quickly looking down to offer a flustered apology. Outside the quiet tea room, Nick dashes away in emotional turmoil, leaving a silver-haired gentleman named Michael watching him vanish down the sunny street in utter confusion. Turning to step inside the doorway, Michael looks around with a puzzled expression, only to be met by Cassia, who greets him with a gentle smile and warmly welcomes Michael inside. Sitting together in the sunlit room, Cassia lowers her gaze over her teacup, softly confessing how utterly stunned she is that Nick tracked her down. Overwhelmed by their sudden emotional encounter and unsure of what lies ahead, she looks away in troubled silence, admitting she has no idea what she should even say to her young stepson. Gently reaching across the table, Michael places his hands over hers, reassuring Cassia that Nick's frantic search is completely natural after losing his beloved stepmother so abruptly. Reminding her of the selfless years she dedicated to Diana's children, Michael suggests Nick's fierce devotion stems from that very same love, startling Cassia as she realizes the profound truth behind his words. Squeezing her hands with gentle encouragement, Michael advises her that avoiding Nick will never resolve their past, urging her to meet him head-on to find the clarity she seeks. Moved by his comforting wisdom and steady guidance, Cassia offers a bright, grateful smile, finding the courage within herself to promise she will have an honest conversation with Nick. Delighted to see her quiet determination return, Michael stands up from the table with a warm smile, affectionately remarking that this resolve is the Cassia he knows so well. Caught off guard by his sudden movement, Cassia looks up in surprise, but Michael gently explains that he ought to take his leave right now so she can focus entirely on Nick. Standing before her with unwavering devotion, Michael offers a reassuring promise that if she ever needs help, he will be right by her side in an instant. Touched by his steadfast presence and comforting kindness, Cassia gazes back at him with deep appreciation, offering her heartfelt thanks to Michael before he departs into the afternoon sun. Wandering back toward the cottage in deep remorse, Nick severely chastises himself for storming off in such an impulsive panic. Hearing her firm refusal directly from her lips was painful, but fleeing into the afternoon sun only leaves him feeling deeply foolish and remorseful. Bitterly ashamed of letting his emotional turmoil trigger a childish outburst, he regrets failing to act like a mature adult. Fidgeting nervously outside her sunlit doorstep, Nick hesitates to step inside, terrified that if he faces his stepmother now, she might cold-heartedly tell him she no longer wishes to see him. Before his lingering anxiety can overwhelm him, the door opens and Cassia softly notes that he returned. Stunned by her quiet, tranquil presence, Nick follows her inside the peaceful home, where a warm, freshly prepared spread of hot food already sits invitingly upon the dining table. Standing face to face in the sunlit room, Cassia gently reassures him that he may remain at the cottage until his troubled feelings settle, promising she will never force him to return home against his will. Utter disbelief washes over Nick as he eagerly asks if he can stay, and Cassia offers a comforting nod. Bursting with pure joy and relief, Nick's eyes light up as he excitedly asks if she is absolutely sure. Clenching his fists in eager determination, he loudly promises to work as hard as he can to earn his keep, filling the room with grateful cheer while Cassia looks on in mild surprise. Without wasting a single moment, Nick eagerly throws himself into daily responsibilities around the tea room. He hauls heavy sacks of supplies, sweeps the floor spotlessly clean, and serves tea to delighted patrons with a bright, enthusiastic grin. Striving endlessly to prove his sincerity and dedication, Nick takes on every task with boundless energy and care. Standing behind the counter, Cassia watches over his eager efforts, her heart touched as a quiet, warm smile softly graces her face. Preparing a hot, freshly toasted sandwich, Cassia sets the plate down and invites Nick to try her food. Watching him devour the treat with eager excitement, she softly tells him to slow down and eat carefully. Nick smiles brightly between bites, enthusiastically declaring that her food is more delicious than anything else. When Cassia softly wonders if her simple cooking pales in comparison to the grand dishes made by the chefs back at the duchy, Nick passionately rejects the thought. He insists that every cake and pastry she ever baked for him was always the absolute best, eagerly asking if she will teach him how to prepare tarts so they can bake together. Cassia agrees with a smile, quietly remarking that knowing the recipe will let him make tarts on his own once he goes back home. Her casual mention of his departure instantly halts Nick's joy. His smile vanishes as he freezes in place, looking at her with a pained, desperate expression as he tearfully asks if she truly has no intention of ever coming back. Gazing directly into his desperate, sorrowful eyes, Cassia offers no false comfort. With calm yet unshakable resolve, she firmly reaffirms her stance, quietly assuring him that her choice to leave the duchy is final and will never change. Before the painful silence can deepen, the clear chime of the entrance bell breaks through the tense atmosphere. A silver-haired gentleman named Alwyn steps into the shop, pulling down his hooded cloak with a gentle, reassuring smile. He warmly greets Cassia, confessing how deeply worried he felt after failing to see her around for the past few days. Cassia offers an apologetic smile, politely asking him not to worry while admitting that many chaotic events have taken place over the past few days. As she and Alwyn speak with comfortable familiarity, Nick stands motionless in the background, watching their warm interaction in helpless, bewildered silence. Reunited after days of absence, the silver-haired stranger greets Cassia with unmistakable warmth, openly relieved to see her standing before him. She offers a soft apology for making him worry, speaking with a gentle, tranquil light in her eyes that reflects how much her world has finally shifted. Watching them from across the room, her son stands frozen in utter disbelief. Never in all those years at the mansion had he seen his stepmother smile with such genuine warmth, remembering only a woman whose face was constantly clouded by a heavy, unbroken sorrow. As he stares more closely at the newcomer, the young boy realizes this visitor is far more than a simple customer. The silver hair, dignified posture, and ornate military attire spark a sudden, overwhelming image of high royalty. Sensing the boy's sharp, watchful eyes locked onto him, the man nervously pulls his hood down to conceal his features. Cassia quickly steps in to explain that he is merely assisting with shop work, leaving him to offer an uncomfortable, sweat-beaded laugh. Unnerved by the boy's intense gaze and rising suspicion, the hooded man stammers out a frantic excuse about retrieving an item he left behind. Leaving Cassia completely bewildered by his sudden distress, he abruptly turns and hurries toward the door. Before Cassia can even ask what is wrong, her son suddenly turns and dashes after the fleeing guest. She calls out in alarm, asking where he is going, but the boy stammers a hasty, flustered excuse about needing fresh air without stopping. Refusing to let the mysterious stranger vanish, the young boy pursues the hooded figure out into the sunny courtyard. He shouts for him to wait, turning a quiet encounter into an urgent pursuit as the truth hangs in the balance. Chasing the mysterious visitor outside into the quiet pathway, Nick stops as the stranger abruptly halts ahead of him. Though nervously sweating beneath his dark hood, the man quickly recovers his composure, turning around with a warm, easy smile to ask if the boy has business with him. Swallowing his rising anxiety, Nick steps forward and confesses there is something critical he needs to confirm right away. Rather than panicking, the stranger steps closer with an amused, confident smile, probing whether his face looks so familiar that the boy had to chase him down. Leaning down close into the dim shadow of his hood, the stranger playfully teasers Nick, asking if he mistook him for the second prince of the empire. The sudden suggestion leaves the young boy stunned in disbelief, while the stranger keeps an unbothered, knowing glint in his eyes. Refusing to be thrown off by the joke, Nick looks him straight in the eye and asks if he is actually the missing third prince. An intense, heavy silence falls between them against the stone wall as neither moves, letting the dangerous question hang unanswered in the air. Breaking the heavy tension, the hooded man suddenly bursts into light-hearted, hearty laughter, leaving Nick completely baffled. Waving his hands dismissively, he playfully insists people constantly mistake him for the missing prince, even claiming imperial knights have stopped him more times than he can count just to verify his identity. Watching his overly carefree demeanor and complete lack of royal dignity, Nick quickly drops his suspicion. He reasons that a high prince who vanished 7 years ago would never risk wandering casually around a humble, quiet village like this. Just as the silver-haired stranger turns to walk away, Nick calls out and halts him with a sudden shift in tone. Setting his royal suspicions aside, the young boy steps closer to ask the real question weighing on his heart, demanding to know if this mysterious visitor is genuinely close to his mother. The word mother hits the man like a violent thunderbolt, completely shattering his easygoing facade. Gripping Nick by the shoulders in a sudden burst of sheer panic, he frantically shakes the boy, desperate to confirm whether Cassia truly has a child, while Nick plainly answers that she is indeed his mother. Reeling back in utter shock, the visitor spirals at the unbelievable thought of Cassia having been married and raising a grown child. Watching his dramatic, sweat-drenched panic, Nick stands bewildered, wondering why a simple shop assistant would react with such extreme distress to news about Cassia's past family. To calm his rising panic, Nick quickly clarifies that while he calls her mother, she was actually his father's second wife, making her his stepmother. The sudden revelation acts like an instant cure, allowing the silver-haired man to place a hand over his heart and exhale in overwhelming relief. With the confusion cleared, Nick presses further, asking directly what his personal feelings and true relationship with his stepmother are. The stranger's expression softens into a tender, gentle smile as he confesses that he genuinely wishes to draw closer to her, though he remains uncertain of how she feels. Hearing his quiet, sincere admission, Nick steps forward with a firm resolve and an unyielding gaze. Looking the man straight in the eye, he declares that he has an important favor to ask, leaving the silver-haired stranger wide-eyed and caught completely off guard as the mood between them shifts. Desperate to keep his family together, Nick grips the silver-haired visitor's cloak and urgently begs for his help. Explaining that Cassia left the estate on the exact day he came of age, the young boy believes she might actually listen if someone close to her intervenes. Without hesitation, the man brusquely shakes Nick's hand off his cloak, dismissing the desperate plea as a complete waste of time. He flatly refuses to convince Cassia to do anything, leaving the young boy bewildered by his cold, unyielding response. Leaning down with a serious, intense gaze, the stranger sternly reminds Nick that neither of them has any right to interfere in her life. He points out that although Cassia is not his birth mother, she faithfully raised him until adulthood before leaving, meaning she clearly had her own reasons that no one should force her to abandon. With an easy, unbothered smile, he adds that he has no desire to see her trapped playing the role of someone's mother. When Nick cautiously asks if he is in love with her, the man readily admits it, clarifying that he is utterly infatuated with her incredible talent as an artist. Dropping a revelation that shatters Nick's assumptions, the stranger reveals that almost every single painting displayed throughout the gallery was painted by Cassia. The news leaves the young boy completely stunned, staring up at the walls in total disbelief. The stranger's sharp words echo heavily in Nick's mind, asking if it isn't selfish to demand her return when he never even knew what she was passionate about. Standing quietly before her breathtaking paintings, Nick is forced to confront the painful truth of how little he truly knew about his stepmother. Staring around at the breathtaking paintings, Nick is struck by the painful realization that every single piece is undeniably beautiful. He clenches his fist in quiet regret, remembering how he always believed they could eventually become a normal family if he just did everything right. But realizing he never even bothered to learn what she loved or excelled at, he acknowledges that it is already far too late, leaving him with no right to ask her to return. Meanwhile, inside the shop, Cassia goes about her morning routine with a quiet, serene sense of peace. She softly smiles to herself, fondly thinking back to how utterly exhausted Nick seemed yesterday and how deeply he slept despite her attempts to wake him. Feeling warm and content, she takes comfort in the tranquil life she has built. Suddenly, the soft chime of the doorbell breaks the morning quiet. Cassia turns around with a warm smile, starting to explain that they are not open yet, but the words instantly freeze in her throat. Standing in the doorway is a tall, dark-haired man in magnificent royal attire, leaving her paralyzed in utter shock. Reeling from his unexpected arrival, Cassia stammers out a breathless question, desperately asking why he is here. Meeting her startled eyes with an intense, unreadable gaze, her former husband steps forward and quietly remarks that so this is where she has been, greeting her after all these years as Lady Cassia. Sitting across from one another in her elegant boutique, her former husband looks around at the quiet room. He remarks that she has been staying in a place like this, taking in the calm atmosphere of her new life. Holding her teacup, she softly replies that the shop feels almost too luxurious and comfortable for her. He looks at her attentively, admitting he felt from the moment he walked in that the place suited her perfectly. Looking down at their quiet table, she realizes he was already well aware of her new boutique. He admits that he deliberately allowed their son to run away from the estate without stopping him. He explains that he believed the young boy needed time to sort out his suppressed feelings. He had assumed, without question, that she would never have the heart to turn her stepson away. Setting her tea down, she politely tries to end their conversation, explaining that she must open her shop soon. Before she can move away, he urges her to pause, stating there is something he needs to ask. He insists on getting an answer before their relationship as husband and wife officially comes to an end. Stunned by his solemn tone, she simply tells him to go ahead. He asks directly if she chose to abandon the Duke's estate because their son refused to accept her as his mother. She immediately cuts him off with a firm refusal. Sitting in shadow, with a heavy heart, she explains that the decision was entirely her own fault. She admits that the problem never rested with the child, but within her own lingering regrets. Clenching her hands tightly against her dress, she recalls the exact moment her hardship began. She confesses that she was so desperate to become a true mother to the children that she completely ignored their real feelings. She admits that she prioritized her own desires instead of matching the children's pace. Hurt by the persistent emotional distance, she lacked the confidence to endure it, concluding she was simply never cut out to be a mother. Fixing his solemn gaze upon her, her former husband asks directly whether their 7-year marriage was truly the worst period of her life, needing an answer before they part forever. When she questions why he cares now, he clenches his gloved hands tightly. He confesses it stems from a belated regret over failing to understand her feelings, asking her to view his curiosity as the final sentimentality of their 7 years. While he provided a comfortable life, she admits she felt deeply lonely the entire time. Yet, because it was a path she chose of her own free will, she felt it was only natural to endure that quiet isolation without complaining. She calmly explains that she left the estate simply because their 7-year contract had ended. Although she offers a polite apology for departing without a proper goodbye, her quiet composure reveals how distant she truly feels from him. She confesses she never believed they were close enough for a face-to-face farewell, judging that leaving a letter was sufficient. As her blunt honesty hits him, he sits quietly, visibly shaken by her cold detachment. Rising from her seat, she firmly tells him that she has said all she needs to say. She requests that he proceed with their divorce arrangements as quickly as possible, turning away despite his desperate call of her name. Before the heavy tension can linger any longer, the shop door opens with a bright chime. A handsome, white-haired young man steps inside to warmly greet her, interrupting their quiet confrontation. Recognizing the white-haired visitor as the missing third prince, the Duke leaps up from his seat in total shock. But before he can approach, the young prince turns around and abruptly leaves the boutique without saying a single word. Desperate to reach him, the Duke bolts across the room, calling out urgently for His Highness to wait. He breaks into a swift run toward the doorway, determined not to lose sight of the prince again. Before he can reach the entrance, the female lead steps firmly directly into his path, completely blocking his exit. Flustered by the sudden hindrance, he demands to know why she is interfering and orders her to step aside at once. Standing her ground without flinching, She reminds him that their own conversation is far from over, pressing him directly on when he will finalize their divorce arrangements. Distracted and anxious, he tries to brush her off, pleading that now is not the time for such talk. Refusing to yield, she fixes him with a cold gaze and sternly tells him to show basic courtesy. She remains resolute between him and the door, making it unmistakably clear that she will not move until he addresses her request. Staring down at her with sudden suspicion, the Duke angrily accuses her of secretly hiding the third prince all this time. Yet seeing her unwavering resolve, he finally relents, promising to proceed with the divorce paperwork the moment he returns to his estate. When she looks at him with visible skepticism, asking how she can be expected to believe those words, he attempts to reassure her. He swears upon his personal honor and solemnly promises in Diana's name that he will keep his word. Politely excusing herself with total composure, she steps right past her former husband without looking back. As her feet glide across the quiet boutique floor, her thoughts remain with the fleeing white-haired young man, silently hoping he manages to avoid being captured. Turning near her shop counter, she watches as the Duke slowly steps back inside from the open doorway. Breathing heavily from his futile pursuit across the threshold, he lowers his gaze in total frustration and reluctantly admits that the prince was far too quick and got away. He urgently informs her that an official summons request has already been sent to the imperial palace, warning that royal knights will arrive momentarily to search the entire neighborhood. Maintaining her quiet dignity despite the mounting tension, she gives a solemn nod and agrees to fully cooperate. Approaching her counter with purpose, the Duke begins questioning her directly about her exact connection to the third prince and how often he visits her shop. Standing her ground with unshakable calm, she refutes his suspicions, explaining that he is merely a customer who mentioned he was traveling for a month. When he pushes further by demanding to know where the prince is currently living, she shuts down his prying without hesitation. She politely reminds him that she and the prince are not close enough to discuss such private matters, and as the Duke inspects her unwavering gaze, he realizes she is telling the truth. Pressing her on when she first realized his identity, she reflects back to the visit from the imperial knights a few days ago. She explains that after they presented a childhood portrait of the missing prince, the striking resemblance made his real identity obvious to her right away. When her former husband sternly demands to know why she failed to report the missing royal, she calmly admits she felt deep sympathy for his confined life at the palace, believing it was far too pitiful to turn him in. Clenching her dress fabric tightly in frustration, she laments that her boutique was built to be a peaceful haven of comfort for her guests, a quiet sanctuary now ruined for the day. Observing her distant composure, the Duke sorrowfully acknowledges that his presence has threatened her peace. Before their heavy conversation can linger, her stepson Nick steps through the front door to greet her, only to stop dead in his tracks. Looking back and forth between his former stepmother and his father in total disbelief, the young boy stammers out his surprise at finding them together. Feeling overwhelmed as the entire situation is increasingly complicated, she raises her hand to her forehead with a heavy sigh. As she retreats behind her shop counter, her thoughts turn back to Alwyn, wondering anxiously if the third prince managed to run far away. Meanwhile, pulling his dark cloak tightly around himself, Alwyn sprints breathlessly through the city streets to avoid pursuit. Remaining behind in her shop, she holds onto a silent prayer that he will evade the searching knights and escape safely. Golden royal banners flutter under a clear sky while uniform-clad soldiers post themselves directly outside the cafe, forcing all business to come to an unexpected halt. Inside, Cassia stands with her arms tightly folded in quiet frustration, staring out the window at the heavy guards surrounding her shop. When she sharp-tonguedly demands to know when she will be permitted to reopen, the officer explains that His Majesty has issued an unyielding order to recover the third prince at any cost. He promises that the crown will reimburse her for all lost income during this mandatory closure, asking for her patient cooperation. Cassia scoffingly rejects the idea that royal money can make up for their intrusion, telling him to do as he pleases since her wishes clearly carry no weight. The officer mentions having Nick return to the estate earlier that morning, hoping he would no longer bother her after the trouble of recent days. Offering no answer, Cassia decisively grabs her coat off the counter and prepares to walk away. Startled by her abrupt retreat, the officer lunges forward off his chair to ask where she is going, only for her to state plainly that she is returning home. Turning her head, she points out that since they have prevented her from running her cafe, there is simply no reason for her to remain behind. Her footsteps carry her out the door as it snaps shut, leaving him standing helpless in the empty room as he softly calls out her name. Upon reaching her private quarters, Cassia pulls the window curtains closed to shut out the light and the world outside. Dropping her coat, she lets herself collapse straight back onto her bed, lying completely still as the sheer physical and mental fatigue of the morning catches up with her. Lifting a weary hand to cover her eyes, she lets out a heavy sigh over how insufferable it is that royal business has invaded both her gallery and her home. Outside her private entrance, armed guards stand on watch, terrifying passers-by and making her own residence feel suffocating. An unexpected knock breaks the quiet as a uniform-clad messenger arrives at the private entrance asking for Lady Cassia, carrying an urgent delivery from Count Allison. Startled from her deep exhaustion, Cassia sits up instantly in bed and hurries down to collect the letter, offering a quick word of thanks while the stationed guard watches on. Before she can step back inside, the officer steps forward and firmly intercepts the envelope, informing her that every letter from the outside must be thoroughly inspected. Indignant at this blatant intrusion into her home, Cassia swiftly pulls the document back and insists that personal mail lies beyond his authority. The officer remains unmoved, revealing that Duke Phaedrian himself ordered the strict protocol for anyone connected to the missing third prince. Her eyes narrow into a cold glare as she realizes the extent of the surveillance surrounding her, feeling the suffocating grip of the Duke's authority tightening around her. Exhaling a weary sigh, Cassia surrenders the letter so the guard will not suffer consequences in his position. Yet her compliance comes with a sharp, uncompromising threat for him to deliver to the Duke. If he intends to strip away even her privacy, she will no longer remain silent. With her warning declared, Cassia slams the door shut with a loud thud, cutting off any further debate. Left standing side by side in the hallway, the two officers stare at one another in speechless silence, caught completely off guard by her fierce defiance. Later that evening, a resolute knock echoes at her door once more. Opening it to inquire who could be visiting at such an hour, Cassia finds Duke Phaedrian standing outside in the dim light, holding her confiscated letter in his hand. The Duke explains that he returned the seal unbroken, so there would be no misunderstandings, emphasizing that her privacy is something he intends to respect. Accepting the intact letter back into her hands, Cassia unfolds the message to read Count Allison's sincere words of worry regarding her precarious situation. As Duke Phaedrian prepares to depart into the night, Michael's letter offers quiet reassurance, promising to rush to her side the second she asks for help. Unwilling to let the Duke walk away while her life remains disrupted, Cassia hesitates for a brief moment before calling out for him to stay. Halting in his tracks at the open doorway, Duke Phaedrian turns back toward her. Cassia steps forward into the room, asking if they can speak privately about the suffocating situation surrounding her home. Seated across from him inside, Cassia delivers a blunt and unwavering demand for him to remove his personal presence from her living space. She pointedly reminds him that their contractual marriage has concluded and she is no longer the Duchess, insisting that he withdraw all his knights from her gallery immediately. Clenching her fist tightly against the table, she urges him to relocate his search base somewhere else, reasoning that his noble status as a duke grants him ample authority to manage such logistics. Phaedrian grips the wooden edge in silence, softly uttering her name as her clear resentment fills the room. Refusing to accept any royal offer of financial compensation, Cassia speaks with intense frustration about how unbearable it feels to live under constant watch. She insists that all she desires is the simple peace of resting in her own home without soldiers intruding upon her life. Phaedrian replies with steady gravity, maintaining that this situation is far too complex for personal choices. Extending his hand, he reminds her that every subject in the empire has a duty to obey the emperor's explicit orders, and he is present solely to carry out that mandatory royal command. Cassia inwardly admits that her fierce demands might appear selfish, fully aware that hiding the missing third prince carries severe treason charges. However, she remains convinced that unless she asserts her intentions right now, the quiet everyday life she fought to build will be utterly ruined. Cassia firmly insists that she cannot live a normal, peaceful life under such suffocating surveillance, pressing the Duke to pull back his guards. Relenting to her quiet plea, Duke Fidrian gives his word that starting the very next morning, his knights will ease their heavy watch around her residence. The following morning, uniform-clad officers arrive at her private entrance to formally announce the Duke's updated commands. Their stationed watch will now be pushed back 50 meters from her home, though they politely request her patience as they must still follow closely whenever she ventures out into public. Letting out a soft sigh of relief at her partial freedom, Cassia wasted no time adapting to the new terms. Gracefully picking up her woven shopping basket, she casually informs the assigned guards that she is heading out to buy groceries, inviting them to tag along behind her if they wish. Escorted safely back to her residence, after completing her errands, the officers respectfully see her off right at the doorway. Offering a polite bow, they present her with her purchased goods and wish her a tranquil evening, stepping back into the courtyard to afford her the privacy she requested. As the front door thuds shut behind her, Cassia steps into the familiar quiet of her private sanctuary, but as she approaches the wooden table to set down her shopping basket, a small folded paper note unexpectedly slips out from beneath the warm bread, landing quietly on the cloth. Glancing cautiously around the room to ensure she remains entirely unobserved, Cassia picks up the mysterious message. Unfolding the hidden slip, she reads a discreet invitation asking to meet tonight at a nearby village, complete with crucial information detailing the exact midnight shift change of the Duke's surrounding knights. Her breath catches in her throat as her gaze lands upon the signature written at the bottom of the secret message. Signed by Alwyn, the missing third prince and her unforgettable first love who vanished 7 years ago. The hidden note leaves her standing frozen, suddenly thrust into a dangerous secret meeting. Outside the quiet building, armed guards remain stationed under the pale night sky, keeping a watchful eye on the perimeter. Wanting to clear a path, she opens the door with a nervous sweat, politely telling the sentry that she would like to step outside for a bit of fresh air before going to sleep. Noticing the guard's uneasy hesitation, she quickly softens her expression and offers a bright, reassuring smile. She gently asks if he would accompany her, skillfully turning a simple request into a peaceful stroll that successfully draws the guards away from their designated post. After thanking the guards for their trouble and wishing them a peaceful night, she retreats back inside and pulls the heavy wooden door shut. The moment she is safely alone in the quiet interior, she rests her hand over her chest and exhales a long, shaky sigh of relief. Glancing over at the clock on the wall, she carefully reviews every step of her plan. Having already confirmed the secret meeting place and mapped out the guards' patrol routes, all that remains now is to wait for the exact moment of their shift change. As night deepens over the estate, the guards finally wrap up their round and walk away to swap shifts with the next watch. With the courtyard left unguarded for a fleeting window of time, a small side window unlatches quietly and creaks open into the cool night air. Wrapped in a dark headscarf and holding a small woven basket, she cautiously peeks through the window frame to scan the shadowed courtyard. Seeing that no guards are in sight, she moves without hesitation, carefully stepping over the ledge to climb down outside. Her feet move swiftly and soundlessly across the stone path as she breaks into an urgent, low-profile sprint. Knowing the shift change gives her 5 minutes at most before the new sentries arrive, she rushes into the darkness, determined to reach her destination unnoticed. As she hurries soundlessly through the dark grounds, a harsh voice suddenly slices through the quiet night, ordering her to halt immediately. Her heart leaps into her throat as she freezes in place, knowing she must somehow clear this guarded perimeter before the full watch arrives. A young sentry carrying a glowing torch steps out from the shadows, his eyes widening in surprise as he instantly recognizes Lady Fidrian. She swallows down her rising panic, forcing a gentle expression onto her face despite the cold sweat glistening along her neck. The guard raises his torch high and sternly asks what she could possibly be doing wandering outside at such an ungodly hour. Clutching her woven basket tightly against her skirt, she carefully observes his earnest, tentative demeanor, realizing he might be gentle enough for her to reason with. She softly explains that restless sleep brought her outdoors for a brief walk in the night air. Gently pointing out that no guards were posted at her door, she adds that she didn't want to disturb anyone, prompting the surprised knight to realize it is currently shift change time. When the attentive sentry offers to walk her back to her room, she politely declines, reassuring him that she was just about to head inside anyway. Offering a warm word of thanks for his hard work, she turns away while he watches her walk back toward the building. Just as she prepares to step back into the safety of the dark corridor, his sudden voice calls out again, asking her to wait. Her footsteps pause for a breathless moment before she turns around with quiet grace, calmly asking if something is wrong. The young knight lowers his torch slightly, his inquisitive gaze fixing directly on the small woven basket she holds against her dress. Feeling the sudden surge of danger, her eyes widen in subtle shock as she maintains her guard, asking him what about her basket has caught his attention. Just as she attempts to step away, the vigilant young sentry leans down slightly politely, asking if he might inspect the basket she is carrying. Her heart races with quiet terror, knowing that one glance inside will completely unravel her secret escape plan before it has even begun. Before the guard can reach out, a mysterious stranger suddenly strikes from behind, releasing a quick spray of sleeping mist that sends the guard groaning onto the cold cobblestones. Shocked by the sudden intervention, she raises her hands to her mouth, frozen in place as the unconscious sentry hits the ground. Stepping over the fallen guard, an elderly figure wrapped in a dark traveling cloak calls out gently toward her. As she stares in bewilderment, a shimmering aura of magical energy begins to swirl around the old man's body, slowly dissolving the mysterious illusion. Her breath catches in total astonishment as the shimmering magical veil vanishes, revealing the silver hair and striking blue eyes of Alwyn, her first love who disappeared 7 years ago. Seeing his familiar, handsome face smiling down at her in the quiet night leaves her completely speechless. Gently reaching his hand out toward her, he offers a soft, playful smile and asks if she would mind escorting an old man to Laurentia village. Relief washes over her in a comforting wave, and a radiant smile lights up her face as she calls out his name. Walking side by side into the quiet, moonlit night, she glances at him with deep curiosity. She gently asks if his elderly appearance was created entirely through magic, wondering aloud if the note that dissolved like smoke earlier was also part of his mysterious spellwork. With a playful grin, Alwyn presents a set of vibrant, glowing magical crystals, explaining that they are enchanted items he acquired from the continent's most renowned mage before running away from home. He goes on to reveal that using these rare magical tools allowed him to wander freely across the land while completely slipping past the royal family's extensive surveillance network. She listens intently, placing a thoughtful hand to her chin as she nods in quiet understanding. Unable to contain her amusement, she covers her mouth and bursts into a sudden fit of gentle giggles. As Alwyn looks at her in utter confusion and asks what is so funny, she playfully confesses that she cannot get his disguised old man voice out of her head, teasing that his trembling tones sounded just like a bleating goat. Pouting slightly at her banter, Alwyn asks if she is making fun of him, grumbling that he actually practiced extremely hard to master that convincing voice. Feeling a bit guilty, she quickly waves her hands to reassure him, insisting that she wasn't mocking his effort at all. Looking up at him with a tender smile, she softly clarifies that she was only laughing because she found his earnest performance so sweet and cute. Her gentle praise catches him completely off guard, bringing a warm, flustered blush to his cheeks as he quietly turns his gaze away. Shifting her attention back to their midnight journey, she scans the quiet village street and notes that address number 77 is completely missing between number 76 and 78. Puzzled by the gap in the row of houses, she wonders aloud if they accidentally took a wrong turn along the path. Reassuring her that they have arrived at the correct spot, Alwyn explains that this particular house is impossible for ordinary eyes to see. Seeing her look of astonishment, he offers a confident smile and reveals that he placed a high-level concealment spell directly over the entire residence to keep it safe. With a crisp snap of his fingers, brilliant magic sparks in the cool air, sending shimmering ripples across the night as the hidden barrier parts like a curtain. As the magnificent house materializes right before her eyes, she gazes up at the sparkling display with breathless wonder. Turning toward her with a gentle, inviting smile, Alwyn graciously extends his hand and welcomes her as the very first guest to ever enter his home. Feeling a deep sense of warmth and relief, she steps forward alongside him, entering the peaceful sanctuary they now share together. Under the quiet glow of street lamps in the dead of night, 2 guards stand watch outside the residence. Their peaceful vigil is suddenly interrupted as a lone figure walks up through the shadows, heading straight toward the front porch of the quiet house. As the unexpected visitor steps onto the dark porch, The vigilant guards call out in alarm to demand his identity. However, as the light catches his face, their cautious tension instantly gives way to deep surprise upon recognizing Lord Nick standing right before them. When the guards ask what brings him back at such a late hour, Nick calmly explains that he accidentally left something important behind in the house. He gently reassures them that his mother should already be resting quietly inside her private room. Holding a gloved finger up to his lips, Nick stresses the urgent need to slip inside silently so he will not disturb her rest. He firmly instructs the guards to remain waiting outside on duty, and they respectfully bow their heads in agreement. Easing the heavy front door open, Nick steps into the dark entryway and closes it softly behind him. A profound wave of relief washes over his face when he finds his forgotten ring of keys sitting safely on the table, right where he left it. With his missing keys safely retrieved, Nick treads softly across the wooden floorboards, but an unsettling atmosphere lingers in the air. Pausing in the hallway, he turns back toward the inner quarters, struck by how unnaturally silent the entire house feels tonight. Deciding to take a quick peek inside just to confirm his mother is sleeping soundly, Nick gently cracks her bedroom door open and softly calls out to her. But as his gaze crosses the threshold, his breath hitches, and his eye widens in sudden, heart-stopping shock. Pushing open the door to the quiet, private quarters, she steps inside with a warm smile, taking in the lovely, spacious room. Carrying a heavy wicker basket in her arms, she moves softly through the entryway, eager to bring comfort to the secretive guest waiting within. Asking if he is hungry, she unpacks the basket and sets out a delicious array of fresh dishes on the table. She explains softly that under the estate's strict surveillance, she worried he hadn't been able to eat proper meals and wanted to make sure he was taken care of. A genuine blush touches his cheeks as he looks at her with deep gratitude, touched that she went out of her way to care for him. She kindly brushes off his thanks with a gentle smile, reassuring him it was no trouble and encouraging him to eat without feeling any burden. As they sit across from each other at the small table, a heavy shade of remorse falls over his face. He apologizes sincerely for keeping his identity hidden despite having many chances to speak, asking if she was completely shocked when she finally learned who he truly was. To his absolute shock, she calmly confesses that she had already known his true identity for a long time. Resting her chin on her hand, she explains that she recognized him the moment the knights showed her his portrait, leaving him flustered and rubbing his neck in sheepish embarrassment. She offers a quiet apology for pretending not to know his secret for so long. He gently reassures her that there is no need to apologize, acknowledging that the moment he panicked and fled upon spotting the Duke, any hope of hiding his identity was already gone. Looking directly into her eyes with earnest resolve, his expression turns deeply serious as the light catches his silver hair. He reveals that the true reason he asked her to meet him in private tonight is because he is finally ready to open up about himself. Insisting on revealing the truth directly from his own lips, he pauses to ask her for one solemn promise before speaking. Looking at her intently across the quiet table, he asks if she can assure him that no matter what secret comes to light, their bond of friendship will never change. With a warm and comforting smile, Cassia gently places a hand over her heart to reassure him. She answers without a moment's hesitation, promising that no matter who he truly is, he will always remain her dear friend, bringing a visible wave of relief and a blush to his face. Rising from his seat, he stands tall and extends his hand toward her with earnest resolve. Looking directly into her eyes, he formally introduces himself by his true name, Adolf de Fontrich, revealing at last that he is the missing third prince of the realm. Taking his outstretched hand, Cassia offers her name in return. She gazes up at him warmly, assuring him that the honor is entirely hers to finally meet Adolf as himself. Settling back down to share a quiet cup of tea, the mood between them turns solemn. Holding his cup carefully, Adolf begins to recount the painful truth behind his flight from the royal palace 7 years ago, revealing that it all started with his father, the emperor. He fondly recalls his childhood, explaining that his father doted on him endlessly from a young age. His father favored him so deeply above all others that he secretly intended to pass the throne to Adolf as the kingdom's next emperor. However, that overwhelming favoritism strained his relationship with his older brother beyond repair. Believing his own departure would restore peace to the family, Adolf fled the palace 7 years ago, only to choose now that his absence never solved anything and instead brought deep suffering to everyone he left behind. Gently taking his hands into her own, Cassia offers him her deepest encouragement. She reassures Adolf that his sincere heart can heal old wounds, promising that if he ever struggles to believe in himself, he can always rely on her faith in him. Unwilling to hold back any secrets of her own, Cassia decides to share her personal past. She quietly reveals that 7 years ago, after losing her beloved best friend, she entered into a contractual marriage with Duke Phaedrian, though that bond is now officially over. Listening attentively, Adolf is visibly touched by her willingness to confide in him. Although he had already guessed parts of her story, hearing her speak so openly gives him a profound sense of gratitude and understanding. A glance at the wall clock reminds them both of how fast the late-night hours have slipped away. Standing up to part ways, Adolf expresses his heartfelt gratitude for her secrecy, while Cassia gently reassures him that he carries no blame. When he asks about what lies ahead, Adolf reveals that their heartfelt conversation tonight has finally crystallized his own determination. With a bright, resolute smile, he declares that he is ready to stop wandering and return to where he truly belongs. Offering a fond farewell, Adolf reassures her that they will surely meet again. He gazes after her with a gentle smile as she prepares to make her quiet exit back to her quarters. Carrying her heavy wicker basket, Cassia treads cautiously along the darkened exterior wall. She carefully stays in the shadows to avoid the vigilant eyes of the guards posted outside the estate grounds. Reaching the safety of her room unseen, Cassia gracefully climbs back through the windowsill. She pulls the wooden window frame shut behind her, standing in the tranquil stillness of her room as the night comes to a close. Breathing a soft sigh of relief, Cassia believes she has successfully slipped back into her private room completely unnoticed. But her brief moment of comfort instantly shatters as a dark, tall silhouette emerges silently from the shadows directly behind her. Turning around in sudden shock, her eye widens in sheer panic as she realizes someone has been waiting for her in the darkness. Stammering his title in complete disbelief, she recognizes the silent figure standing tall before her in full formal military uniform and white gloves. It is Duke Phaedrian, her former husband, watching her every move from the quiet gloom of her quarters with a heavy, ominous presence. Fixing her with a stern, unyielding glare, the Duke gazes down at her with intense suspicion. With his brow furrowed in grave disapproval, he ominously demands to know where on earth she could possibly have been wandering at this late hour of the night. Confronted unexpectedly inside the room, she finds the Duke waiting in full uniform, his voice sharp as he demands to know where she could have been at such an ungodly hour. Hesitating under his gaze, she quietly stammers that she simply couldn't sleep and went out for a walk. His gaze narrows with clear skepticism at her weak excuse. Defensively, she turns the question back on him, asking why he entered her private bedroom uninvited. But the Duke remains composed, explaining that seeing her open window made him fear something had happened to her. Stepping forward to close the distance between them, he insists his explanation is clear and demands the real truth from her. She desperately claims she only wanted to be alone for a while, but he looks down at her with cold doubt, asking how he could possibly believe that. Before the confrontation can break her, frantic footsteps echo down the corridor, and Nick bursts through the doorway. Breathing heavily, he rushes forward to place his own body between them, throwing out his arm to shield his stepmother, while boldly claiming she was with him the entire time. Pinching his temple in mounting frustration, the Duke asks why his son is even here when he was ordered back to the estate. Yet Nick refuses to back down, standing firm as he covers for her, claiming he asked for the late walk himself to speak with her one last time. Nick steps up without hesitation, taking full responsibility for the situation and claiming his stepmother was only fulfilling his own late-night request. Standing boldly between them, he insists that if his father intends to blame anyone for this unexpected meeting, he should direct all his frustration onto him alone, leaving the Duke momentarily silent. Before the Duke can challenge his son's sudden defiance, a sharp knock breaks the tense silence. An officer steps into the room with urgent news, interrupting their heated confrontation to report that a mysterious nobleman, believed to be the long-lost third prince, has just been sighted making his way toward the gallery. Putting their argument on hold, the Duke and stepmother hasten down the grand corridor together toward the gallery. Upon entering the room, their eyes fall on an elegant, silver-haired young man standing near the window, his regal cloak catching the soft morning light as he quietly admires the surrounding artwork. Turning around, the silver-haired figure reveals striking blue eyes and a serene expression that commands instant respect. Recognizing the royal heir immediately, the Duke and his knights drop to one knee in formal salute, offering their grandest greetings while his stepmother stands nearby, stunned by the sudden reappearance. Rising to speak, the Duke notes how remarkably dignified His Highness has grown during his 7 long years of absence. The prince responds with a gentle, composed smile, playfully remarking that he was already an adult back then, though he supposes he must have appeared rather immature in the Duke's eyes. Smiling subtly at the banter, the Duke remarks that the Emperor will undoubtedly be overjoyed to receive word of his safe reappearance after so long. The third prince maintains his calm demeanor, offering a quiet nod of agreement as their eyes lock in quiet mutual understanding. Shifting swiftly back into command, the Duke turns to his aide with sharp orders to send immediate word to the Emperor regarding the prince's location. He instructs the guards to prepare for an immediate departure from the estate, surrounding the royal heir with full protection for the journey back. Adolf turns to Duke Phaedrian with a calm, courteous request, asking if he would mind having the surrounding knights step aside for a short while. He explains that before departing for the imperial palace, he wishes to share a private farewell with an old friend. Respecting the prince's quiet authority, the Duke nods in understanding and promptly leads his men out of the grand gallery room. Once they are seated across from each other in the quiet gallery, Cassia voices her gentle concern, asking if he will truly be all right returning to the imperial court after 7 long years of absence. Adolf offers a serene, reassuring smile, explaining that running away no longer solves anything, and he is ready to face his fate willingly. He warmly credits Cassia herself for giving him the courage to face what lies ahead. Gazing thoughtfully at the artwork displayed along the gallery walls, Adolf admits that he wanted to burn her paintings into his memory before leaving. He confesses how deeply reluctant he feels to part ways now that they have finally reconnected after all these years. Holding her gaze with absolute earnestness, Adolf catches her completely off guard by asking if she would leave this estate and come to the capital with him. He speaks his heart directly to her, declaring that he wants nothing more than to remain by her side and watch her paint forever. Cassia freezes in utter astonishment, her eyes widening as his earnest proposal hangs in the quiet room. Meanwhile, Duke Phaedrian stands silently in the distance, watching their intimate interaction with a sharp, guarded expression. Adolf promises that if she comes along, he will provide every possible resource and ideal environment so she can devote herself entirely to painting as an independent artist. Cassia tightly clutches the fabric of her skirt in her lap, deeply affected yet overwhelmed by his grand offer. Turning her eyes toward the sunlit window, she expresses her heartfelt gratitude before softly asking if he could grant her a little time to think. Adolf gently reassures her that there is no need to give an answer immediately, encouraging her to take all the time she needs to consider the life she truly wishes to lead. He assures her that whenever she reaches a conclusion, he will be ready to hear her choice. Cassia offers her sincere gratitude for his patience, finding deep comfort in his reminder of their enduring friendship. As the call for departure echoes, Adolf tenderly reaches out to clasp her hand, reminding her that his invitation will remain open whenever she decides to visit him in the capital. Bending low, Adolf presses a gentle kiss to the back of her hand, promising to wait for her message. Cassia nods softly with a quiet smile, entirely unaware of Duke Phaedrian watching from the shadows nearby, his hand tightly clenching his sword in mounting, unspoken frustration. The royal escort soon makes its way past the windmills and into the vibrant village, where excited crowds gather along the sunlit path to cheer for the long-lost third prince. Mounted gracefully on his horse, Adolf smiles and waves to the celebrating townspeople, returning their grand welcome with effortless warmth. Glancing back over his shoulder, Adolf casts one final look toward Cassia. Feeling profound gratitude for everything he has brought into her life, she brightens into a radiant smile and stretches her arm high into the sky, waving a spirited and joyful farewell as he rides off. Surrounded by Duke Phaedrian and the Grand Imperial Guard, the prince journeys farther down the open road. As the clatter of hooves fades into the distance, a quiet farewell settles over the estate, leaving Cassia alone with her thoughts to ponder his life-changing offer. Word spreads like wildfire among high society ladies that the third prince spent every morning visiting this very gallery, drinking coffee while admiring the paintings. Fascinated by rumors of his high praise, Eager noble guests flood into the grand hall, filling every corner of the cafe with lively chatter as they gather to inspect the artwork for themselves. Nick and the dedicated staff move gracefully through the crowded room, serving endless trays of hot coffee, tea, and delicate pastries to the demanding visitors. The frantic pace flows throughout the afternoon, maintaining its energetic momentum right until the warm golden hues of sunset wash over the roof of the building. Once the last customer departs, Nick carefully finishes tallying the day's accounting ledger and joyfully announces that today yielded their highest sales since the gallery's grand opening. As she pauses her cleaning to look up at him, her expression softens into a warm smile as she expresses her sincere gratitude for his tireless assistance. Still, a gentle concern crosses her mind that the Duke might take issue with his precious son working so hard at the shop counter. Nick immediately brushes her worries aside, revealing that his father was actually the one who instructed him to stay by her side and offer full support, anticipating the sudden influx of patrons. Hearing those words leaves her momentarily stunned as a quiet warmth settles in her heart. Though no one ever spoke of it openly or made grand displays, she realizes that the family had been attentively looking out for her well-being and supporting her behind the scenes in their own subtle ways. Taking a steady breath, she gently taps the table and asks Nick to take a seat beside her so they can speak privately. He quickly pulls out a chair and sits down across from her with focused attention, leaning in as she quietly brings up the past, asking why he chose to lie to the Duke by claiming they were out walking together. Looking intently across the table, she asks Nick directly whether he actually knew where she had gone on the night she left. He hesitates, lowering his head as he admits he caught her slipping out of the house in the middle of the night, confessing that his immediate instinct was simply to cover for her and keep her safe. Her expression softens into a tender smile upon hearing his sincere answer. Reaching down, she presents a heavy coin pouch across the table, offering it as his full pay for all his dedicated service. Though Nick raises his hands in flustered protest, claiming he volunteered, she firmly presses it forward, expressing her profound gratitude. Looking at him with calm resolve, she gently informs Nick that it is finally time for him to return home to his family where he belongs. Taken aback, Nick anxiously argues that running the busy shop all by herself will prove too overwhelming, especially once the prince's return is announced, but she quietly reassures him that she will hire extra help. Nick lowers his gaze with a remorseful, bittersweet smile, apologizing for having selfishly prioritized his own feelings for so long. Glancing over at the paintings hanging along the sunlit gallery walls, he asks if she created them herself, revealing that the third prince was the one who told him the truth about her artwork. Warm sunlight bathes Nick's face as he confesses that talking with His Highness made him painfully aware of how little he knew about her or what she truly desired. Staring down thoughtfully, he adds that every single painting she created is genuinely breathtaking. Looking at her with a soft, affectionate smile, Nick earnestly begs her never to let her artistic talent go to waste, promising that he will always be cheering her on from afar. Stepping into the warm glow, she gently places her hand over her heart, smiling back as she reveals that she has something important to tell him as well. Warmly reaching across the small table, she gently takes Nick's hands into her own and looks intently into his eyes. She quietly confesses that living as his mother for the past 7 years brought her genuine happiness, reassuring him that she truly understands his feelings and will always be ready to welcome him. Overwhelmed with emotional relief, Nick's flustered hesitation instantly vanishes as his flushed face lights up into a bright, joyful smile. Looking back at him with soft tenderness, she offers a gentle, reassuring smile and promises that he can return any time he needs to rest his wings. Stepping outside into the radiant golden glow of twilight, Nick turns back toward the shop and waves both of his arms wildly in an energetic farewell. She stands gracefully at the glass doorway, waving back with a warm smile until he disappears down the sunlit path, leaving the gallery peaceful. After hanging the sign marked closed on the front door, she stands alone inside the quiet counter area and lets out a long, weary sigh. Looking around the empty shop after such a frantic afternoon, she acknowledges that running everything entirely on her own is far too exhausting and resolves to hire extra help soon. Pausing in the silence, her eyes wander toward the detailed landscape paintings hanging along the illuminated gallery walls as she thoughtfully ponders when she last created art of her own. She recalls the third prince's previous invitation to study art in the capital, reflecting on how incredibly tempting that offer was. Suddenly, the gentle chime above the shop entrance sounds as a late visitor unexpectedly opens the front door after sunset. Turning around with a startled expression, she steps forward, preparing to politely apologize and inform the newcomer that the gallery cafe is already closed for the day. Stepping through the doorway with a suave, handsome smile, Prince Michael casually asks if he can get a fresh cup of coffee. The moment she recognizes his voice, her face instantly lights up with an unreserved, joyful welcome, genuinely thrilled to see him standing before her again. Surprised by his unexpected arrival right after sunset, she asks what brought him back to the gallery so late in the evening. Looking at her tenderly, he openly confesses that he simply wanted to see her, playfully teasing that he was on the verge of collapsing from lovesickness if he waited any longer for her call. Reassuring him that she was deeply happy to see him, she admits she had spent every day agonizing over what to write in her letter. But the gallery was completely swamped with eager patrons after rumors spread of his daily visits. As she pulls out a chair and asks him to rest while she cleans, he curiously inquires about her remaining chores. Smirking playfully, Michael rolls up his sleeves and gently reminds her that he is a talented magic user. Though memory magic is his specialty, he confidently snaps his fingers with a flash of light, summoning a cascade of enchanted bubbles that instantly scrubs the mountain of dirty dishes clean. Overjoyed by the effortless cleanup, she impulsively leaps forward and wraps her arms tightly around his neck in an ecstatic, affectionate embrace. Caught completely off guard by her sudden warmth, Michael flushes bright red as he holds her, amused that finishing her chores made her far happier than his initial arrival. Still resting comfortably in his arms, she looks up at him with a beaming, radiant smile, warmly thanking him for single-handedly finishing all of her closing work. Overflowing with gratitude, she eagerly offers to do whatever he asks in return, prompting Michael to soften his gaze as he quietly prepares to make his request. Leaning in close with a gaze full of fond affection, Prince Michael softly asks if he can claim her time starting right now. Gently clasping her flustered hands into his own, he earnestly invites her out on a date to make up for the quiet moment they lost before. Her cheeks flush bright red as a radiant, happy smile spreads across her face, warmly nodding in heartfelt agreement to his proposal. Hand in hand, the two of them gracefully step through the open doorway together, setting off into the glowing, sunlit afternoon. Cassia gasps in quiet surprise as a grand gesture suddenly unfolds before her. Standing outside beside two magnificent steeds, her companion proudly reveals that he had these splendid black stallions brought all the way from the earldom just for this moment, their dark coats gleaming under the soft evening light. Looking back at her with a gentle, nostalgic glance, he asks if she remembers those distant days. Cassia's eyes light up with warmth as she fondly recalls how the three of them used to ride together in their youth. He laughs softly in response, bringing up how Diana had thrown a stubborn tantrum, insisted on riding alone, and ended up taking a tumble that required weeks of bandages. Ever since that unfortunate accident, Diana became utterly terrified of riding, shrieking at the top of her lungs whenever she went near a horse. Cassia grins affectionately as she remembers her dear, scatterbrained friend, feeling the sweet weight of the precious memories they shared so long ago. Reaching out to hold the leather reins toward her, he asks if she would like to take the saddle again after all these years. He softly reminds her how naturally skilled she was during her first lesson and how much joy it brought her. Cassia presses a hand against her chest in quiet wonder, moved that he preserved such a small, meaningful memory, encouraging her to let the open breeze sweep away all of her accumulated tension. Their fingers gently touch as she reaches out to accept the reins. Admitting that she has genuinely missed feeling the cool wind against her face, Cassia securely settles into the saddle and grips the leather, ready for the journey. As their horses set off into a steady gallop, the rushing air sweeps across her face, bringing a genuine glowing smile to her lips. Riding close beside her, he turns his head to watch her relaxed expression, sharing a quiet, unspoken warmth as they ride together toward the brilliant colors of the setting sun. Gently coaxing the horses to a slow stop, night descends over the estate, while stars emerge across the evening sky. Standing side by side near the quiet mansion, the lingering calm of their ride settles over Cassia, giving her a tranquil moment of peace she has not experienced in a very long time. Stepping close beneath the quiet night sky, Michael gazes down at Cassia with warm, playful admiration, confessing he had to try his best just to keep up with her impressive riding skills. Blushing softly at his unexpected compliment, Cassia smiles in sweet delight and teasingly replies that they really should have placed a wager on their race. Gently stroking the black stallion's gleaming coat, Cassia admits how wonderful it felt to ride freely after so many years, expressing a sincere wish that they can take the horses out together again. Noticing the cool evening chill surrounding her, Michael softly on building a fire, soon creating a bright crackling campfire for them both to sit beside on the quiet grass. Warming her hands before the flickering flames, Cassia reflects on how long it has been since she last enjoyed such a peaceful moment, looking up to thank Michael for a truly wonderful day. Touched by her smile, Michael gazes back with tender eyes and admits he was secretly nervous, worried she might no longer find joy in riding as she did during their childhood. Looking up at the twinkling stars, Cassia thoughtfully remarks that while the steady passage of time changes so many things, certain precious feelings remain completely unshakable. Turning toward her with a caring, attentive look, Michael gently brings up the letter she sent him long ago, asking if she is still keeping her vital vow to protect her own life and happiness. Lowering her gaze as the tranquil atmosphere surrounds them, Cassia hesitatingly opens up about another pressing matter that has been weighing heavily on her heart. She confides that His Highness strongly suggested she move to the capital to pursue a formal education in art, though she nervously admits she doubts whether she truly holds genuine artistic talent. Listening intently to her self-doubt, Michael thoughtfully reassures her that while art lies outside his expertise, he senses something remarkably special in her work. He warmly encourages her to embrace the opportunity, assuring Cassia that studying in the capital will surely allow her to refine her skills and blossom into a far finer painter than she already is. Looking up at him with quiet vulnerability, Cassia softly asks if he truly believes in her ability. Michael gazes back at her with deep seriousness, but just as he starts to respond, a sudden hesitation grips his words, leaving an unsaid thought lingering between them in the silent night. Cassia gasps in quiet surprise as Michael pauses, his voice dropping into a gentle, deeply earnest tone. Looking down at her with complete devotion, he softly reveals his wish for her to remain by his side forever, expressing his heartfelt desire to walk the entire path of life alongside her from this moment on. Overwhelmed by his sudden declaration, Cassia stares in wide-eyed shock, clutching her hands against her chest as her heart races in her chest. A warm blush spreads across Michael's cheeks as he offers her a breathtakingly gentle smile, openly declaring that this is his true, unreserved confession of love to her. Holding her hand tenderly before the crackling campfire, Michael admits that, while he took a long and roundabout path to return to her side, he wants to be with her every morning and night. Reassuring her that he has loved her for a very long time and that his feelings remain entirely unchanged, Cassia's heart thumps wildly as she softly speaks his name. Lightening the atmosphere with a tender, playful smile, Michael softly tells her not to mistake this for his formal proposal just yet, promising that his official proposal will be far more spectacular. As he gently asks for her answer, the sheer weight of his devotion overcomes Cassia, causing tears of joy to spill softly down her face as she whispers her sincere gratitude. Wiping away her tears with a trembling hand, Cassia musters her courage and softly admits that she cares deeply for him too. The moment those words leave her lips, Michael sweeps her into a sudden, passionate embrace, pulling her firmly against his chest as if promising to never let her go again. Wrapping her arms tightly around him, Esquias buries her face into his shoulder, completely surrendering to the comfort and safety of his arms. As they sit together on the grass beneath the starlit sky, Michael holds her nestled snugly in his lap, softly calling out her name when he notices how quiet she has suddenly become. Exhausted after years of enduring silent heartbreak and heavy burdens, Cassia gently closes her eyes and falls into a peaceful, deep sleep against his chest. Looking down at her tranquil face with boundless tenderness, Michael smiles softly, recognizing just how much exhaustion she has carried for so long, while promising to quietly guard her sleep. Carrying her softly into the tranquil bedroom, Michael gently lays the sleeping Cassia onto the bed. He carefully pulls up the blankets to keep her warm, watching her rest peacefully as the deep exhaustion of the past finally slips away. Gazing down at her peaceful face with boundless tenderness, a soft, devoted smile brightens his expression. Moving closer, he gently presses a tender kiss against her forehead, holding this quiet moment of intimacy close to his heart. Softly apologizing for taking so many years to return to her side, Michael holds her hand tightly in his, promising never to let go of her again. Standing by her bedside as the peaceful night surrounds them, he gazes down at her one last time and whispers a sweet goodnight. Awakening slowly to unfamiliar morning light, she opens her eyes inside a spacious room filled with soft tranquility. Confusion instantly settles in the moment she sits up in the grand canopy bed, clutching the sheets tightly as she glances around the quiet chamber. She desperately tries to piece together how she ended up resting here. Vivid fragments of last night begin to surface, bringing back the clear memory of Michael leaning close and holding her hand. She vividly recalls his earnest proposal to walk the path of life alongside her from this moment on. Yet as she presses a hesitant hand to her glowing cheek, everything after that conversation dissolves into an absolute blur. Horror washes over her as she faces the humiliating realization that she fell fast asleep right in the middle of his confession. Gathering her composure, she steps out of the bedchamber and moves gracefully through the quiet residence. Her footsteps come to a sudden halt near the dining area, where a neatly prepared breakfast of golden toasted sandwiches and a fresh glass of milk awaits her. Beside the food lies a small piece of parchment filled with Michael's thoughtful handwriting. He noted how utterly exhausted she seemed, gently urging her to eat before meeting him later at the gallery. A warm, tender smile touches her face as she picks up a sandwich, taking a quiet bite while feeling the deep care woven into his simple gesture. Later at the gallery, she occupies herself by sweeping the pristine floor, trying to settle her fluttering thoughts. The soft sound of the opening entrance door pulls her attention away from her work, prompting her to turn around in surprise. Michael stands there looking back at her, his expression softening into a calm, gentle smile that warms the quiet space. Hearing footsteps echoing into the quiet gallery before opening hours, she turns around in surprise, her face instantly brightening as Michael walks in. When she playfully points out his early arrival, he responds with quiet warmth, confessing he came early just to see her even a minute sooner. He asks tenderly if she slept well, noting how peacefully she rested without stirring a single time after falling asleep. Laughing off her lingering embarrassment, she admits she was genuinely startled to discover what it felt like to pass out so completely. His tone shifts to a hesitant quiet as he asks if she remembers what he told her last night. Shyly claiming her memory was hazy from drowsiness, she quickly changes the subject to thank him for the delicious breakfast, adding that it felt just like a meal prepared by a devoted husband. Stepping forward on tiptoes, she stretches up and places a swift, gentle kiss right on his cheek. The affectionate gesture leaves the air around them still as she pulls back, her heart fluttering at her own bold impulse. Flustered by what she just did, she quickly announces she will sweep the front of the shop before darting right past him. Left behind in total astonishment, Michael slowly touches his cheek, a breathless smile and a deep red blush washing over his face. Over by the counter, Michael offers to lend a hand with the daily workload of running the gallery. She pauses with the teapot in hand, expressing gentle concern about how exhausting the labor can be, especially since he cannot use his magic in front of ordinary visitors. Brushing aside her worries with complete sincerity, Michael steps close and warmly wraps his hands around hers over the teapot. He gazes into her eyes, softly reassuring her that no amount of hard work compares to the heartache of watching her struggle all by herself. Michael playfully proposes a trial run as a gallery assistant, assuring her with a charming smile that she may fire him without hesitation if he falls short of her expectations. Touched by his earnest devotion, a delicate blush warms her cheeks as she gratefully accepts his offer to work by her side. When the gallery officially opens its doors for the day, a lively crowd of eager visitors quickly streams inside to fill the tea room. Michael moves smoothly among the tables, serving tea trays with refined elegance, while she watches from behind the counter, completely captivated by how effortlessly he manages the heavy workload. As warm golden evening light floods through the front windows, the last remaining guests bid their friendly farewells. Working in sweet harmony after closing hours, they wipe down the tables and tidy the chairs together, savoring a peaceful moment of quiet companionship as their long day draws to a close. The peaceful quiet shatters when an unfamiliar voice echoes through the room, noting that the shop is just as bustling as rumors claimed for a spot frequented by the third prince. Turning around in shock, she gasps as the sharp-eyed visitor smiles craftily, greeting her directly as the Duchess of Fidrian. Sensing potential danger, Michael instantly steps in front of her with his arm extended protectively, sternly demanding to know who the intruder is. Unfazed by his cold tone, the woman presents her business card, introducing herself as Hannah Cooper, a journalist from the capital, while Michael inspects the card with guarded suspicion. When Hannah reveals that she has come to ask them both several probing questions about their past, a heavy tension fills the room. Refusing to cower or hide behind Michael, she bravely steps forward to answer the unexpected inquiry head-on, while the journalist conceals a knowing, sly smirk behind her notepad. Taking a seat across from the journalist, the heroine calmly presses her guest to state her true business. When Hannah slyly probes into her exact relationship with Count Michael, who stands behind her with crossed arms in vigilant protection, the heroine remains entirely unfazed by the personal question. When Hannah dismisses small talk and gets to the point, she reveals that her newspaper company intends to publish an exclusive special feature on the third prince. Her editor-in-chief has commanded her to secure an interview regarding his whereabouts by any means necessary. Leaning across the table with a sharp gaze, the reporter directly accuses her of harboring the missing prince ever since he arrived. Standing her ground without hesitation, the heroine coolly responds that His Highness was never hidden, but was merely a regular patron of her gallery. Pressing deeper, Hannah insists that the heroine must be more familiar with the prince's affairs than anyone else. Smirking with brimming confidence, she offers lavish financial compensation and widespread publicity for the shop, insisting that giving up the information is a win-win deal. With a polite yet resolute smile, the heroine flatly rejects the enticing offer. Declaring that she has no need for compensation or publicity with her hands already full, she gracefully rises from her chair to bring the tense discussion to a close. Refusing to walk away empty-handed, Hannah abruptly springs to her feet. Leaning aggressively over the marble table, she frantically begs the heroine to state her desired terms and reconsider giving the interview just once more. Firmly bidding her uninvited guest good day, the heroine makes it entirely clear that her only desire is for the persistent reporter to leave at once. Unfazed by the abrupt rejection, Hannah smirks with calculating malice, musing that if an official interview is completely out of the question, she will simply have to take matters into her own hands. Declaring that she will be forced to employ alternative measures, the reporter turns her sharp eyes toward Michael as a dark, heavy tension suffocates the quiet room. With a chilling smile, Hannah sinisterly threatens to publish a sensational scandal involving the Duchess of Fidrian and Count Alan instead. Gazing at them with a sharp, taunting grin, Hannah glibly asks how that option sounds to them. She maliciously boasts that a scandalous rumor of their quiet romance will captivate the public's intense interest just as effectively as any official news regarding the third prince. When her initial polite request for an exclusive interview is met with refusal, journalist Hannah smoothly shifts her approach. Leaning forward with a sharp, calculating smile behind her glasses, she warns that being turned away leaves her with no choice but to employ alternative measures, subtly gesturing toward the noble standing nearby. She unhesitatingly lays out her threat, proposing a fabricated romantic scandal linking the Duchess of Fidrian with Count Alan, a nobleman renowned for his strict bachelorhood. With a smug smile, Hannah asks whether such an explosive story would not captivate the public's interest just as eagerly as any talk of the prince. Though momentarily taken aback by the sheer audacity of the move, the heroine quickly recovers her quiet poise and asks outright if she is being threatened. Hannah merely clasps her hands together and feigns complete innocence, claiming she is simply offering a polite professional compromise out of concern for her subject. Hannah paces back and forth across the room, pointing out just how famous the Duchess remains throughout high society. She stresses that linking her to the bachelor count would undoubtedly throw the entire kingdom into an uproar, framing her aggressive ultimatum as a considerate gesture meant to safeguard her public reputation. Instead of flinching under the journalist's bold attempt at coercion, the heroine pauses and lets out a soft, amused chuckle. Looking straight ahead with calm grace, she gently informs the ambitious reporter that every single one of her elaborate assumptions is entirely wide of the mark, leaving Hannah clutching her notebook in complete confusion. With calm, unwavering composure, she completely dismantles the reporter's grand strategy in a single breath. She softly reminds Hannah that she is now a commoner just like her, revealing that she formally divorced the Duke of Fidrian a few days ago, and leaving the once confident journalist staring back in utter shock. She goes on to clarify that although she remains a blood relative of the Bennett family, she severed all official ties with them long ago following her parents' passing. Looking at the journalist with calm composure, she points out that anyone genuinely knowledgeable about her background would already know she currently holds the exact same commoner status as the reporter herself. Hannah's eyes widen with intense excitement at the unexpected revelation, and she eagerly scrawls notes in her book while calling the divorce an absolute scoop. She breathlessly presses for the secret reasons behind the sudden separation, but the heroine remains utterly unbothered, flatly refusing to answer any intrusive questions regarding her private life. Turning to the reporter's second attempt at coercion, she firmly shuts down any rumor of a romantic involvement with Count Alan. She explains that she was close with his late sister since childhood and shares only long-standingship with him, clarifying that he merely came by today to assist with her work upon hearing of her divorce. As Hannah stands completely speechless, the heroine addresses the final point regarding the third prince, refusing to grant an interview out of respect for his privacy. She calmly asks whether a respectable journalist would truly risk destroying her own professional credibility by publishing sensationalized articles built on nothing more than wild speculation. With a gentle, self-assured smile, she softly concludes that all of the reporter's inquiries have now been thoroughly satisfied. Maintaining her graceful poise, she gestures smoothly toward the exit and politely asks the thoroughly flustered journalist to show herself out of the establishment. Once the reporter departs, Count Alan watches her leave before turning back to the heroine with a warm, admiring smile. He light-heartedly admits that she handled the aggressive confrontation so eloquently and decisively that he could not find even a single opening to step in and defend her. Sensing his lingering hesitation, the heroine softly asks Michael if he has something left on his mind. As he blushes deeply and stammers that they are not yet officially courting, she gently asks whether her previous explanation about their relationship happened to hurt his feelings. Charmed by his bashful honesty, she smiles warmly and calls him endearing, light-heartedly teasing that she could almost hug him right then. Hearing her words, Michael abruptly turns back with serious determination, declaring that he will personally have the storefront glass replaced tomorrow with frosted window panes to block outside eyes. As evening falls over the town, laughter echoes from the shop while Hannah wanders down the darkening street alone. Trudging the cobblestones, the crestfallen journalist clutches her coat and despairs aloud over how completely her evening strategy crumbled. She clutches her head in utter frustration, berating herself for throwing away what should have been a career-defining exclusive scoop. Though she normally would have dug in her heels to extract a story, the heroine's composed yet chillingly intense presence had left her feeling paralyzed with fear throughout the entire confrontation. Her self-pity is abruptly cut short when a tall shadow suddenly stretches across the stone floor in front of her. Halting in her tracks, Hannah looks up with wide, startled eyes as an intimidating presence blocks her path through the empty street. Stepping forward out of the night, Count Alan gazes down at her with a chilling, unreadable expression. Hannah stammers his name in shock, completely caught off guard by the nobleman's sudden appearance and the mysterious, ominous atmosphere radiating around him. With dark magic surging around his lips, the Count utters a binding command, declaring that she will remember nothing from today other than their brief meeting. Glowing magic circles instantly swirl in Hannah's eyes, locking her into a mindless hypnotic daze as she softly obeys his command. As the reporter's notebook drops to the cobblestones, Count Alan gazes down with a cold, unyielding stare while dark magic surrounds his words. With a solemn binding command, he orders her to completely wipe away every trace of meeting Cassia Bennett or knowing about his connection to her, instantly placing the woman into a silent, spellbound daze. Shaking off the hypnotic spell under the street lantern's faint glow, Hannah rubs her head in confusion, wondering if the intense encounter was nothing more than a fleeting dream. She bends down to pick up her fallen notepad from the dark pavement, quickly deciding to abandon her current pursuit and redirect all her efforts toward tracking the third prince. Inside the quiet sanctuary of her workshop, the heroine works peacefully into the late hours, completely unbothered by the tension on the street. With a fine brush in hand and a wooden palette resting comfortably on her arm, she carefully applies strokes to the blank canvas with deep, unbroken concentration. Gently setting her paintbrush down beside her tools after hours of painstaking effort, she steps back to take in the finished artwork. A beautiful sunlit coastal scene stretches across the canvas, capturing a breathtaking seaside town and bringing a quiet, fulfilling warmth to her heart. Golden morning light soon streams through the high workshop window, signaling that an entire night has swept past while she remained lost in her art. Looking upon her finished piece, a soft, radiant smile touches her lips, reflecting the genuine peace she feels in this new chapter of her life. Yet as she gazes at the coastal painting, an unforgettable memory of the third prince gently surfaces in her mind. She vividly recalls how he had asked her to accompany him to the capital, promising to give her everything she needed so she could fully devote herself to her passion as a true artist. As his tender, radiant smile fills her thoughts, she softly whispers Michael's name into the quiet room. Though years have passed since their paths first crossed, his gentle presence touches her deeply, stirring long-cherished memories of the man who has always held a special place in her heart. Turning back to her easel, she quietly gazes upon the sunlit coastal landscape brought to life on the canvas. With her artistic dream finally within reach, she stands peaceful and resolute in the warm morning light, ready to embrace the bright new journey unfolding before her. Inside a quiet sunlit garden tea room, a heavy conversation begins when she announces her intention to close the gallery. Surprised and deeply troubled by her sudden choice, Michael gently questions why she would give up the one place where she had finally found a sense of belonging. She softly explains that with Hannah growing increasingly suspicious of their relationship, she can no longer rely on his support, nor does she have the confidence to manage the gallery alone. Though Michael earnestly reassures her that he will handle Hannah himself, her heart is already set on a different path. When she firmly declares her choice to move to the capital, Michael's eyes widen in utter shock. She shares how she spent the entire night engrossed in her canvas until dawn broke, completely captivated by the process and driven by a quiet desire to test her own artistic abilities. Nervously clasping her hands in her lap, she admits she does not know if she has true talent, yet she is certain of one thing: painting brings her pure joy. A radiant smile fills her face as she describes art as the very first thing in her life she has ever chosen for herself and truly loved. Her tone grows solemn as she reveals her decision to accept Adolf's proposal. Michael's face turns pale as shadow falls over his eyes in quiet heartbreak, while she gazes back with somber clarity, having known deep down from the moment she heard the offer that her journey would inevitably lead here. Looking across the table, she offers a sincere apology for giving him such painful news after he went through the trouble of conveying his feelings to her. Yet with unwavering resolve in her eyes, she confirms her determination to study art in the capital, leaving Michael to rest his head in his hand with a heavy, sorrowful sigh. Michael lowers his eyes, shadow falling over his face as he quietly accepts her firm resolve. Realizing that her heart is set on moving to the capital to pursue her true passion for art, he softly admits that he can no longer change her mind. Outside, news of the closing notice spreads quickly to the street. Shocked patrons crowd into the gallery, asking in utter disbelief why she would shut down such a booming business when it was finally thriving. Cassia bows her head with a gentle smile, offering her sincere gratitude for their patronage while explaining she posted the notice in advance so distant visitors wouldn't make a wasted trip. Before the crowd can disperse, the energetic reporter comes running inside, demanding to know if the closing notice is real. When Cassia calmly confirms her choice, the reporter passionately protests, gripping the counter tightly as she insists that closing such an important sanctuary for imperial citizens is simply unacceptable. Instead of being shaken, Cassia steps up and whispers a clever proposal. Recognizing that the journalist desperately needs material for an article, she suggests writing a piece on the gallery's closing instead of pursuing an interview about the third prince, promising the story will draw massive public interest. Seeing that Cassia will not give up the scoop on the prince, the flustered reporter reluctantly accepts the proposal. She trudges away from the tea room in complete confusion, questioning herself on how easily she allowed her professional focus to be redirected. A few days later, warm golden sunset light streams through the glass windows of the quiet tea room. Cassia works alone inside, sweeping the floor with a broom before stopping to exhale a weary sigh as the final days of her gallery come to an end. Just as Cassia finishes sweeping the quiet tea room, an unexpected visitor interrupts her work. An envoy clad in an ornate imperial uniform and bearing the emperor's crest steps inside after business hours. Surprised by his sudden arrival, Cassia turns to face him, quietly bracing for whatever message he brings. The envoy lays down a front-page newspaper article about the gallery's sudden closure, which has sparked intense public interest across the empire. As Cassia calmly acknowledges the growing commotion, he reveals that the emperor officially proposes designating her gallery as an imperial memorial hall dedicated to the third prince. Explaining that crowds of buyers are already rushing to purchase the property, the envoy offers 500 gold pieces if she surrenders the shop to the imperial family. Recognizing that the emperor chose to negotiate rather than seize the land by decree, Cassia clutches her dress as she considers her next move. Meanwhile, high above the capital at the prince's residence, news of the imperial envoy's secret mission quickly reaches the palace grounds. Inside the grand hallways, guards stand watch in hushed surprise as word spreads that the emperor sent an aide directly to Laurentia. Sitting at his desk, Adolf listens in disbelief as his aide recounts the meeting between Cassia and the emperor's envoy. Cassia had boldly turned down the offer on the spot, arguing that since the gallery owed its fame to the third prince's presence, the decision was not hers alone to make. Handing over the official report, the aide reveals that Cassia refused to surrender the gallery unless Adolf personally signed a contract consenting to the transaction. Holding the paper with wide eyes, Adolf reads her defiant words, stunned that she stood up to the crown to protect their connection. Reading her clever demand, Adolf breaks into warm laughter, deeply touched that Cassia was thinking of his protection right until the very end. With newfound resolve, he immediately commands Enoch to dispatch a reply to Laurentia by day's end and prepare for their departure at once. Gazing down at the ornate document sitting on his desk, Adolf smiles tenderly as he prepares to sign. He marvels at her bold spirit, knowing this official contract will soon seal her wish and bring her to the capital. Meanwhile, back in Laurentia, warm sunset light floods the gallery as Cassia finishes her final preparations. Standing outside to watch the last carriage depart down the quiet street, she smiles with somber gratitude as she prepares to say a final farewell to her beloved shop. Stepping back inside, Cassia is met with a delightful surprise. A lavish steak dinner set neatly upon the table. Wearing an apron, Michael explains that he personally prepared the regional cuisine of the earldom she had once wished to taste, admitting he had delayed it to ensure everything was perfect. With a gentle, bittersweet smile, Michael shares his hope that the meal pleases her, acknowledging that this is their final supper together in the tea room. Cassia offers her heartfelt gratitude, and he softly urges her to eat while the food is still hot. Taking her first bite, Cassia brightly declares the dish to be absolutely exquisite, praising his culinary skill as expected from a count's chef. As the quiet evening surrounds them, Michael softly admits that sharing this meal brings back fond memories of the days they spent together. They raise their glasses in a quiet, intimate toast, the crisp clink of wine glasses ringing through the room. Blushing faintly under the soft light, Cassia smiles with gentle warmth, cherishing the quiet closure of this chapter before her new journey begins. As the quiet evening settles around them, Michael softly calls out to Cassia over their evening drinks. Holding his wine glass with tender hesitation, he gently brings up her upcoming journey to the capital once again. Unable to hide the deep affection still in his heart, Michael gazes back at her with open vulnerability. With his hand tightly clutching his vest in quiet desperation, he asks her if she would please reconsider her choice just one more time. Cassia stops mid-sip, her purple eyes widening in genuine surprise at his sudden heartfelt plea. Caught entirely off guard by the earnest emotional warmth in his voice, she gazes across the table in silence, feeling the profound weight of his lingering regret.